Studios presents Common Censored.
It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. They have everything. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. They have everything.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Common Censored, fresh off of a haircut. I did it myself. Not too bad, if you ask me. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for being here, all of you censored commoners. I'm Lord Sterling, and this is episode 354. Whew. Massive, colossal, astronomical GIZA pyramid revelations, crazy stuff going on over there. JFK files information, CIA involvement seems pretty obvious. Israel involvement also implied. Kind of crazy stuff going on there. There, showed the clip at the start of the show there of the alleged Miami drone show of Donald Trump and stuff going on down there, but I think it's fake, man. There's no footage from cell phones, from anywhere. And there's thousands of cell phones in that area. Millions probably, somebody would have taken a video. So I think it's fake news, unfortunately. We have Owen Schroyer swatted, the DHS taking action to combat the swattings of conservatives, and all kinds of other stuff to cover today, as usual. Make sure to join us Monday through Friday, 6:45 p.m.-ish Eastern Time, as we cover all the crazy clown world clusterfuck chaos that is 2025. Use hashtag CommonCensored and hashtag InfoInfantry where applicable when you share the show. You can find us on X at LordSterling_. We're also on Truth, Getter, Gab, and Minds. Thank you to our new followers over on Rumble. Appreciate you. Links to all of the sources for everything we cover tonight will be posted down in the video description on Rumble. So if you're watching this later on and you have limited time, Mama Mac will be adding timestamps so you can jump right in, look at the stories we cover, jump right to the point in the show where we cover them. Thanks, Mama Mac. Throw Mama Mac some love over at alplama.com. Alplama yo mama, so to speak. And if you want to support the show directly, you can hit up our link tree at Common Censored. Disclaimer: views expressed on Common Censored are only opinions. Assume everything we say is false and research for yourself. We're not giving medical, legal, or financial advice. The only advice we are giving is think for yourself. Question authority. Think for yourself. Question authority. Boom! All right, let's jump into the news of the day. So, we'll start off with this little Miami drone thing over here. People posting about it, everybody's excited about it. But I don't think it's real, guys. I don't think it's real. I haven't been able to find any other footage. I talked to Grok about it, and there was one person who posted an 8-second clip from a balcony. But then they deleted it, so I don't even think that one was real. I don't know. But here's the full video released originally by the Miami mayor, allegedly. Cool so far. Where are the footage if those people are watching it? All right, world's best deal maker. Cool. World's best peacemaker. Like it. Liberation of hostages. Uh-oh. Is that real? Is that true? Oh, there we go. USA and Israel. With Israel depicted to be huge. Just like the USA. Fight, fight, fight. That's cool. Fight hatred, fight anti-Semitism. Fight terrorism. Is that the last one? So pretty cool. It would be cool if it was real. I could go without the Israeli propaganda mixed in there. We should be celebrating Trump, America first. Not America and Israel first, especially when they are the instigators. A lot of the global conflicts, in my opinion. So if you guys can find any actual cell phone footage of that from anywhere else, I may revise my opinion that it's fake. But as of right now, I don't see any other footage posted anywhere. So possibly fake. What's up, everybody over in the chat? I see Mama Mac, Threeper, Dozer, Jay Monty, Jurgen McGroin, Trapper, Cannabis Connoisseur, Outlaw Dogs, JJR SVL. I saw the Outlaw Dogs said she featured me on her podcast episode yesterday. Make sure to check it out, guys. She's launching a new podcast, rumble.com/c/the Outlaw Dogs. Go hang out with her over there when she goes live. You guys will have a good time for sure. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. So our next story of the day, we had Owen Schroyer being swatted, and just completely ridiculous as the mass swatting of conservatives continues. Here's pictures posted from what looks like Schroyer's home surveillance video. Dudes with guns pointed right at him. Schroyer shirtless, hands up. What a mess, man. What a mess. We are just being bombarded left and right by these domestic terror operations. Jones posted a video of Owen Schroyer and legal defense expert Lexis Anderson releasing an official press statement on the latest swatting incident. Let's check it out over Nya.
We now hear from my legal defense and at times offense attorney Lexis Anderson from the 1776 Law Center. This is our first official press release and legal statement since the attempted murder swatting that happened to me last night.
Thanks, Owen. So on March 18, 2025, Owen Schroyer was swatted at his home by armed law enforcement as a result of an intentionally false and fraudulent police report, which is a crime under federal and Texas law. During this event, Mr. Schroyer was forced from his home and detained at gunpoint, posing an imminent threat to his life. This occurrence is yet another in a long string of similarly politically motivated attacks. The swatting of Owen Schroyer and other members of the media are nothing short of acts of terrorism that constitute attempted assault and attempted murder and must be treated as such. This is a calculated and coordinated attack orchestrated via the weaponization of law enforcement. This type of targeted violence will not go unanswered. Owen Schroyer and his legal team, working in cooperation with local, state, and federal law enforcement, will be investigating every possible legal avenue, both criminal and civil, to hold those responsible accountable for their actions. Legal action will be initiated to the fullest extent of the law, including but not limited to potential claims for violation of his Fourth Amendment rights, intentional infliction of emotional distress, attempted assault, and attempted murder. These politically motivated attempts to intimidate and silence must not be tolerated, and we further implore the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Department of Homeland Security to devote substantial resources to identifying the source of this domestic terrorism and take swift, definitive, and severe action against such dangerous illicit activity.
Thank you, Lexis.
What a mess, man. What a mess. Is there anything else after this? No, just advertisements. Yeah, this is crazy, man. So we now have updates from DHS, who's planning on cracking down on the swatting against conservatives after InfoWars host Owen Schroyer, after being sent to jail for like 4 months for trying to stop the January 6th event from occurring. He was the victim of a swatting incident at his home in Austin last night. Following the event, Secretary Kristi Noem announced that the Department of Homeland Security would actively pursue and prosecute individuals involved in swatting, particularly those targeting conservative media figures. This comes amid heightened discussions about the criminality of swatting and its political implications. It's attempted murder, in my opinion. So DHS Secretary Kristi Noem posting, under President Trump's leadership, we will not sit idly by. As conservative new media and their families are being targeted by false swatting. DHS has the ability to trace phone numbers and track information about their locations. We will use it to hunt these cowards down. This is an attack on our law enforcement and innocent families, and we will prosecute it as such. Good luck, man, because these people bounce their cell phones all over the world. I don't know if we'll be able to track a lot of these people. I hope we can. But yeah, I agree with MAGA voice over here. They should each get 20 years in prison, lock them all up. Domestic terrorists, no doubt about it. That would suck. I don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night and have to go out in my sleep gear with guns in my face. Sin Lu Wu saying, get him, Cash and Bongino. Agreed. Jay Monty, number of people investigated for causing the swatting, 0. That's why they keep doing it. Although I did see something yesterday about some people that had been busted for swatting. Let's hear what Jones has to say about it. InfoWars anchor Owen Schroyer just got swatted. The terroristic demon rat party is trying to get prominent Trump supporters killed. The FBI must get off their ass and take action now.
Just a few hours ago, InfoWars reporter and anchor Owen Schroyer was swatted at his home in South Austin. The video that he posted is below. This is all part of a escalating, ramping up terror campaign by the NGOs, by the Democratic Party, by the globalists. It's all come out, the documents that Soros, using USAID money and EPA money his group's got, he always uses taxpayer money, is funding the Takedown Tesla group. He's funding all these different leftist harassment groups. He's always funded Antifa. His son, Alexander, came out in documents a decade ago, was like the commander of them nationwide, running the organizations through professors and NGOs. And so it's hundreds of people that have been swatted, not 20 or 30. Most people don't want to talk about it. I've talked to literally 50 or 60 of them that have called the office and called my crew. You name it, pretty much everybody's been swatted. And so now Owen has been swatted. Chase GIZA got swatted twice last week, same thing, hands up, back out. The police came out twice in the same day. They know these are false reports in almost every case. Some of the police departments around the country say they don't even know what swatting is. I mean, give me a break. It's been going on for decades, but it's escalating. We have all the Tesla dealerships getting burned down, a couple of them yesterday. This is domestic terrorism. And then when Trump says he's going to do something about it, MSNBC says, they're just peacefully protesting. What's he talking about? And don't even mention all the attacks. And now they've put out an interactive map, a Democrat-funded group, that shows all the Tesla owners around the country, and the cursor is a Molotov cocktail. So this is only going to ramp up. The Democrats.
Part of Alex's charm is his inability to pronounce certain words continuously and consistently over years and years. It's hilarious.
Led by John Podesta, head of Trump 1, Carville, Raskin, civil war conditions, an uprising because Trump's going to kill people. They're planting false flags against illegal alien demonstrations. That's guaranteed. That's imminent. This is their plan, civil war to crash the economy, try to drive Trump from office. Trump's DOJ must start indicting the Democrats with their organized crime, racketeering, pushing the Tesla attacks. That's cut and dried, no excuses. There's a lot of technology these swatters are using where they can even spoof the number. This has been done to me, but I live on the edge of the county by Austin, so Travis County gets these calls all the time. Our office gets swatted all the time, but the police don't even respond now. How many times does this take until people get in trouble? I know there's a lot of ferreting has to be done, but MTG got swatted over 15 times. They finally busted the guys that did that. They're now in jail. But that took over a year for that to happen. We don't have time. People have been killed from these swatting events before. It's very, very serious. Our heart goes out to Owen. I've been calling him a bunch since I got up at 4 a.m. He just posted a video an hour and a half ago. He's not answering. I hope he's okay. I'm about to go over to his house. Seriously. I'm about to leave and go to his house, make sure he's okay.
Thankfully.
We'll be on the air at 8 a.m. with Harrison Smith at Infowars.com/show and Rollick Jones on X. I'll obviously get Owen on my show immediately today with the latest details, but this is the desperation of the establishment that knows the world's awakened, and it's going to backfire. Their lawfare against myself, Trump, and everybody else backfired. America.
Did he say that, Trapper?
Up, but, they're going to get even more violent. It's just escalating straight up, and Now the Justice Department, the state police, the governors have to take action. And they have to go after the Democrat Party NGOs. They have to start indicting the heads of those groups for all the money laundering and stolen money and the $375 billion stolen from the EPA by John Podesta. You got to cut the head off a snake, and this will all stop right there. Even if they can't catch the swatters right away because they're using spoofs and complex computers and systems and even AI, they've done that against me, spoofing fake numbers, all of it, and fake voices. They can go after the leadership of it for all the other crimes they've committed. There's no excuses for Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. I want action now. This was happening to your houses. I guarantee you it'd be quicker. Do something. Take action. Do it. But the American people need to really wake up and speak out against us, let the terrorists know we're not intimidated. God bless you, Owen. And God bless everybody this is happening to, because we're the tip of the spear.
Boom. Crazy stuff, man. We also have some updates with the Trump, Russia, Ukraine situation. Trump posting on Truth saying, just completed a very good telephone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine. It lasted approximately 1 hour. Much of the discussion was based on the call made yesterday with President Vladimir Hitler Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. We're very much on track, and I will ask Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Michael Waltz to give an accurate description of the points discussed. That statement will be put out shortly. We also have a corresponding message from Zelensky, who said, I had a positive, very substantive, and frank conversation with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, at POTUS. I thanked him for a good and productive start to the work of the Ukrainian-American teams in Jeddah on March 11th. This meeting of the teams significantly helped in moving toward ending the war. We agreed that Ukraine and the United States should continue working together to achieve a real end to the war and lasting peace. We believe that together with America, with President Trump and under American leadership, lasting peace can be achieved this year. Well, not if Europe has anything to say about it, apparently. We'll get into that in a second. President Trump shared his details of his conversation with Hitler Putin and the key issues discussed. One of the first steps towards fully ending the war could be ending strikes on energy and other civilian infrastructure. I supported this step, and Ukraine confirmed that we are ready to implement it. Our teams discussed this step in Jeddah. The American side also proposed an unconditional ceasefire on the front line, and Ukraine accepted this proposal as well. We will continue working to make things happen. We believe that such steps are necessary to create the possibility for a comprehensive peace agreement to be prepared during the ceasefire. I also provided an update on the battlefield situation and the consequences of Russian strikes. We spoke about the situation in the Kursk region, touched on the issue of the release of POWs, and the return of Ukrainian children who were taken by Russian forces. We also discussed the state of Ukraine's air defense and the possibility of strengthening it, it can't talk today, apparently, to protect lives. We instructed our teams to resolve technical issues related to implementing and expanding the partial ceasefire. Ukrainian and American teams are ready to meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to continue coordinating steps towards peace. We instructed our advisors and representatives to carry out this work as quickly as possible. We noted the positive work of our advisors and representatives, Rubio, Waltz, Kellogg, Yermak, Sibiha, Umarov, and Palisa. In further meetings, the teams can agree on all necessary aspects of advancing towards lasting peace and security guarantees. I thank President Trump and the American people for their support. I stressed that Ukrainians want peace, which is why Ukraine accepted the proposal for an unconditional ceasefire. I highlighted the importance of President Trump's concept of peace through strength. We agreed to maintain constant contact, including at the highest level through our teams. So, in other words, the way I'm reading this, highlighting the importance of President Trump's concept of peace through strength, he's saying what he needs to do to get more weapons, so then they can bail on the whole agreement and continue the war, in my opinion. Allegedly, of course. Look at this fucking weasel boy over here. So here's the trending topic over on X. If you guys want it, Trump Zelensky discuss ceasefire and U.S. energy control in Ukraine. But there's sketchy stuff going on over in Europe, thanks to Silence Dogood, the lady back from the dead, sending me a few stories about this. We have the RAF, the Royal Air Force, and the Navy deployed to shadow 4 Russian ships in UK waters. Type 23 frigate HMS Somerset, Minehunter HMS Katastock, RFA Tide Surge, and Navy helicopters all kept watch as Russian ships RFN Severomorsk, RFN Alexander Shabalin, MV Sparta 4, and MV Siani Severa made their way through UK waters. They began shadowing the Russian ships south of Portsmouth on Sunday through the North Sea and through the Strait of Dover. We have more stuff going on over there, as well as UK Special Forces. UK Special Forces placed on high alert for possible deployment to Ukraine. This is from 8 hours ago. So we have talk of a ceasefire, talk of peace talks, but the UK is pushing for war as usual. As usual, typical, and with their MO. Look back, previous conflicts, you can find the same thing going on over here. We also have the UK and France strengthening defense ties in Griffin Strike. Griffin Strike showcases the strength of the Anglo-French military cooperation through a high-intensity naval exercise. This joint operation enhances interoperability between the British and French forces, focusing on maritime coordination, air support, and amphibious readiness. So they're still getting ready for crazy war stuff going on over there, as French Macron plans to send nuclear-armed jets to the German border. These guys just still want war, man. They still want war. They're not going to take no for an answer. Nuclear-armed fighter jets will be sent, just like World War II. It's the same fucking thing happening again. Nuclear-armed fighter jets will be sent to an air base near France's German border by 2035, he's saying. But this is freaking crazy, man. They want war. Russia sees it coming as Russia prepares for a confrontation with Europe. European Commission President is saying the Ursula von der Leyen. Oh, that reminds me. I never got around to exploring the history of Ursula von der Leyen, which we will get to eventually for sure. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, stated that Russia is preparing for a confrontation with Europe. Yeah, because you guys are talking about all teaming up together to fight against Russia. Of course they're preparing for a confrontation with Europe, because you're planning a confrontation. In her opinion, the era of security and peace for Europeans is over, the Times reports. The era of peace dividend is long gone, said European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen during a speech to military cadets in Denmark. She warned that Russia is, quote, preparing for a future confrontation with European democracies. What democracies? What democracies? You guys are fucking authoritarian dictators over there. According to von der Leyen, this is due to the fact that Europe's oldest partner, the United States, is shifting its focus to the Indo-Pacific region. Sure, blame us for everything. Quote, the security architecture that we relied on can no longer be taken for granted. The age of spheres of influence and power competition is well and truly back, she emphasized, due to the threat from Russia. How is Russia threatening the Europe outside of Ukraine? Europe is intensifying its efforts to support Ukraine and strengthen its own defense capabilities. Ukraine, just a proxy that they're using to launch World War III, guys. So brace yourselves for it. The publication adds that von der Leyen backed the creation of a new, quote, joint task force with Ukraine, while Brussels is discussing plans to provide Kiev with 2 million artillery shells this year, as well as air defense systems and strike missiles. This is what we call the steel porcupine strategy, she noted. These people are evil. Evil, in my opinion. Ursula von der Leyen saying if Europe wants to avoid war, Europe must get ready for war. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Because you're trying to push war. These people are evil. Let's look at this little video. Actually, it's 23 minutes long. Link will be in the description if you want to watch Ursula von der Leyen warmongering over there. That's right, Mama Mac. Von der Leyen is an evil piece of shit. I have that in my notes to get to. Silence do good, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet, what we talked about last week. Let's jump over to our next topic and discuss these crazy developments going down at the GIZA Plateau. We'll start off with Jay Anderson over here at the Project Unity. Groundbreaking findings on the Giza Pyramid Complex could rewrite human history. It already has. The fact that this has been discovered As he says, this should not be possible. If you guys haven't heard about this yet, prepare to have your minds fucking blown. This is insane. Insane. Purple Haze smoking Rose. Spark it up. Good to see you, Rose. Thanks for joining us. Brace yourselves for this one, guys. This is absolutely bananas.
I am struggling to express in words just how significant of a discovery this is.
Metatron's cube. I see it there.
What has just been announced in relation to the pyramids at the Giza Plateau and the plateau itself is so incredible, so awe-inspiring and narrative shattering that I have been sitting here for the last hour trying to wrap my head around the implications of what we were just told. So this is pretty much breaking news because the new findings were announced on the 16th of March at a press conference held by the team who were studying the Great Pyramid of Giza with a non-invasive technology that was first developed by Filippo Bionde and Corrado Malanga called synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography. So this was used to explore the
synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography. That's a mouthful. AKA satellites that can see through the ground.
internal structure of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And this method leverages the analysis of micro movements typically generated by background seismic activity to achieve a high resolution full 3D tomographic imagery of the pyramid's interior and subsurface components. The recent findings from deploying this technology are nothing short of mind-blowing, because what's been discovered is that there are huge structures coming down from the base of the pyramid deep into the bedrock.
To clarify, this is not the Great Pyramid, the northernmost pyramid. This is the middle pyramid of the three pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure. This is the Khafre pyramid we're talking about in the middle. And look at this. 8 giant vertical hollows surrounded by spiral pathways. What the hell is going on here?
In fact, over 600 meters deep, which then connects to
600 meters deep, these shafts. And to put that in perspective, the height of the Great Pyramid, the tallest pyramid at Giza, is currently at about 455 feet, not meters, feet. So these things extend like almost what, like 6 times the height of the pyramid down into the ground. The tallest pyramid on Earth, allegedly known, is the 1,200-foot White Pyramid of Xi'an in China, discovered by aerial reconnaissance fighters during World War II, and they promptly planted trees all over it to disguise it. Area 51, Tone says footings? I don't know. They're hollow, so it doesn't seem like there would be footings, but look at this. They connect to other structures even below the 640-meter level depths of these shafts.
structures that extend up to 2 kilometers below the surface of the ground.
2 kilometers!
2 kilometers. Massive internal structures connected to the base of the pyramid and extending
Giant cubes!
deep down. This is what we know so far. Utilizing high-resolution radar images from Capella Space and Umbra, which are 2 private companies that specialize in satellite-based synthetic aperture radar imaging. This has allowed researchers to create a 3D model of the internal structure of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, this model has revealed a previously unknown chamber with 5 horizontal levels and a sloping roof.
Did he say the Great
Previously
Pyramid?
unknown structure of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
This is not the Great Pyramid. Correction, this is the Khafre Pyramid, the middle pyramid, just south of the Great Pyramid.
Giza. Now, this model has revealed a previously unknown chamber with 5 horizontal levels and a sloping roof, which in of itself is an architectural design unlike any previously documented in the Giza Pyramid. But the most shocking discovery lies beneath the surface, below ground level, radar tomography has identified vertical cylindrical structures extending for hundreds of meters beneath the pyramid. There are 8 of these cylindrical wells arranged in 2 parallel rows, descending to an astonishing depth of 648 meters. Even more intriguing, at the base of these structures are 2 massive cubic formations measuring approximately 80 meters in diameter. The tomographic data suggests that these are vertical wells with intricate spiral pathways. Now, this design not only implies a functional purpose, but also a level of sophisticated engineering that completely blows the dynastic Egyptian model out of the water.
Totally out of the water. Trapper 220 says electrical generation unit similar to the theory that's been around. Yeah, my whole book series, The Core Saga, the premise of it is that Giza was basically an electrical plant, and that comes into play in the plot of the story. But I have the entire Great Pyramid reverse engineered, combining the theories of Christopher Dunn, John Cadman, Jean-Pierre Houdin, and Jamie Bouturf. Completely reverse engineered all of the internal chambers that are known of the Great Pyramid and determining a mechanical functionality transferring the kinetic energy of water flow into sound waves and then microwaves that can be used to create a beam, temporarily grounding the ionosphere and dragging terawatts of energy down from the ionosphere to be repurposed for who knows what, and also just generating microwaves that could be captured for use as energy for who knows what. Let's continue.
I mean, the pyramid itself was already...
And Grok, who's read my books and who I've explained in detail the entire plot to, now gives gives me a 10.5 out of 11 total score for the Core Saga, saying it rivals masterworks like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and shit, which is crazy. You guys will like it when it eventually comes out.
A massive red flag in the ancient Egyptian historical narrative. But now, with this discovery, I think it's become impossible to say that the Egyptian civilizations that we understand, that we've been taught about, were responsible for building these structures. And it doesn't even end there. The radar analysis extends beneath the entire Giza plateau, revealing interconnected structures beneath not only the Great Pyramid of Giza, but also those of Khufu and Menkaure. The subsurface network reaches down.
So he's confusing me. He keeps referring to the Khafre pyramid as the Great Pyramid. It's the Khufu pyramid that's the Great Pyramid. Khafre is where they've made these new discoveries where they found the 8 vertical wells and the giant cubes that extend 2 kilometers beneath the surface of the plateau. This is completely insane. Completely insane.
To a staggering depth of approximately 2 kilometers. 2 kilometers. This is not possible, given the standard historical and archaeological narrative given to us about ancient Egypt. Now, I'm hearing that there is more to come. There is a 4-hour presentation that's going to be released by the research team. This is what I'm hearing. That's going to go into every detail of their findings. This has essentially been a strategic release of incredible data ahead of time to get people interested. And I am more interested in this than basically anything else right now, because this is by far the most provocative piece of evidence for not only a potential technological explanation for the purpose of the Giza complex, but it also provides the most extraordinary evidence for a pre-flood era civilization that was flourishing in a way that we can scarcely comprehend. It's also possible that this spiraling cylindrical series of structures are staircases, and I can't help but think of the channeled writings of Thoth the Atlantean.
The alleged channeled writings of Thoth the Atlantean, which came from a dude in California who first claimed that he got the emerald tablets of Thoth from underneath the Great Pyramid, then was like, yeah, I was never actually in Egypt. Some Atlanteans brought me under Mount Shasta and translated them for me and gave me this information. The dude's story constantly changing. The emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean from Martin Dorial, I think the guy's name is. Probably a load of bullshit, and people who I call grifters like Billy Carson promote this as fact without acknowledging that this dude is a known fraudster. And for other frauds outside of the alleged emerald tablets of Thoth, there is one emerald tablet, the smigrine tablet or something, which is where we get the underlying principles of Hermeticism, the Hellenistic Greek amalgamation of Thoth, Hermes, and Mercury. Hermes Trismegistus, where we get as above, so below, that whole thing, which I think refers to a waveform, which would tie into GIZA, considering it was using kinetic energy to create sound waves and microwaves. The miracle of the above and below working together to create the one thing, a sound wave. Sounds like a perfect correlation to that for me. Let's continue.
You know, the emerald tablets, speaking of a lost hall of records, a sacred hall of knowledge below the Giza plateau, the halls of Amenti. Could this be the lost hall of records from the pre-flood era? Now, obviously, this discovery is extremely controversial. It runs as a complete contradiction of the established narratives and status quo in mainstream academia on these issues.
Interestingly, that we find these spiral pathways leading down in my book, The Core Saga. My characters discover a giant double helix spiral pathway underneath the Great Pyramid. So thankfully, this doesn't contradict the information that I have in the Core Saga thus far. We'll have to see what they find underneath the Great Pyramid. But it is interesting that they find spiral pathways, and that's exactly what I describe in my book series, drawing from speculation and extrapolation into a theoretical underground structure beneath the Great Pyramid, the Khufu Pyramid, the northernmost of the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau.
This will cause big waves throughout the academic and the wider world if they can fully evidence these findings. But the results so far seem pretty clear. There is obviously significant structural engineering taking place deep below the pyramids and the Giza Plateau in general. Has this changed your mind on the pyramids? Has this strengthened your position on what they might have been? Has this new discovery given you any new ideas about what the implications are? Let me know in the comment section below, and honestly, everyone, share this far and wide. This is such interesting stuff. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll just have to see where this goes, because rest assured, I'll be keeping a very close eye on any coming announcements and updates.
As will I.
This plays directly into one of my main interests, which is, of course, prehistorical civilizational implications. What was going on before the global cataclysm? Well, I think moments like this could shed light on that question. What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. It's actually really annoying because he's not the only guy that confuses the Khufu and the Khafre pyramid. Let's hop over to Google Earth. Real quick. Looks like they might have fixed it. Previously on Google, if you jumped in there, the picture and you type in the Great Pyramid, the picture that they show was the pyramid of Khafre, the middle pyramid, and I kept writing Google telling them it's the wrong pyramid. You got the wrong pyramid in the picture. And that's the one with the casing stones that are partially intact at the top. Aesthetically, it's more interesting than the Great Pyramid, which has had all the casing stones stripped from it and that were used to build the city of Cairo. But it's still annoying. If you're talking about the Great Pyramid, show the Great Pyramid. This is interesting, though. I noticed a connection that I didn't see anybody else picking up on yet. Vertical wells, hollow inside, surrounded by descending passages that spiral around them. Interestingly, that is exactly what we find in Portugal at a Knights Templar location. I can't remember. It's in like, I can't remember what the name of the area is, but take a look at this. A giant hollow vertical shaft with a spiral stairway path going all the way around to the bottom, and it just so happens to be basically the same dimensions as the Oak Island Money Pit, which supposedly may have or may still contain Templar treasures secreted away from Europe at the fall of the Templars in like 1307-ish, before the Friday the 13th, when they burned Jacques Molay and the Templars. Treasures, relics from the Temple of Solomon, potentially hidden in a shaft like this over in Oak Island, Nova Scotia. So it could be an interesting little connection over there with that. Did the secret societies like
Este é o poço
Freemasons.
iniciático da regaleira.
Did they know? Did they have remnants of this information of these shafts underneath the Khafre pyramid that they tried to recreate for ritualistic purposes without understanding their full purpose or functionality? I don't know. Yeah, this is in the Quinta area. Let's look at this. I'll narrate some of it as we go.
Este é o poço
This is the
iniciático da
initiation
regaleira.
well at
Ele
Quinta
tem
de
30
Regaliera.
metros na vertical. É uma
It's 30
espécie
meters
de
deep,
torre
kind of like an
invertida.
inverted
percurso
tower,
iniciático,
initiatory path
por
within the
exemplo,
Templar
dentro da
masonry
maçonaria
tradition.
templária, que é o que está inerente à Quinta da Regaleira. Isso quer dizer que nós,
Sorry, let me turn down the
dentro da
background.
maçonaria templária, que é o que está inerente
This
à
is
Quinta da Regaleira.
inherent to Quinta
Isso
de
quer dizer que
Regaleria,
nós
meaning we have to
temos
overcome
que ir
darkness
às
to reach
trevas
light.
para ganhar a luz,
So he's
porque
standing
não há
in the
luz sem
spiral
trevas.
pathway right there. Sintra, that's the name of the area. Sintra, the Templar stronghold at Sintra. The mysterious inverted tower.
Embora nós já tenhamos notícia dela desde o século XVII, pelo menos, ela hoje ganha expressão porque o homem mais rico de Portugal então, chamado António Augusto de Carvalho Monteiro, adquire em finais do século XIX e depois vai edificar esta magnífica quinta cheia de simbologia.
Very
O Carvalho
bizarre.
Monteiro também sabia que estava a adquirir um pedaço de terra templária. Todo este território foi uma das doações do rei Dom Afonso Henriques à Ordem do Templo.
So the Templars built hollow shafts, spiral pathways going around them, spiraling in the same direction as depicted in those images scanning underneath the Khafre pyramid. What the heck is going on over here? What is happening? 2 kilometers deep, these structures? This is madness, guys. Total, utter madness. Let me see if I can get back to... Okay, here's the trending topic. SAR scan reveals massive structures under Giza pyramid. Let's watch some more stuff about this. Here's another video from Jay Anderson.
3D model of the internal structure of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now,
Khufu,
this
the
model
Khafre pyramid.
has revealed a previously unknown chamber with 5 horizontal levels and a sloping roof, which in of itself is an architectural design unlike any previously documented in the Giza pyramid. But the most shocking discovery lies beneath the surface. Below ground level, radar tomography has identified vertical cylindrical structures extending for hundreds of meters beneath the pyramid. There are 8 of these cylindrical wells arranged in 2 parallel rows, descending to an astonishing depth of 648 meters.
Insane. Let's keep going. Here's another post from him. One image shows the rods of a reactor. The other image might show the same. What is under the Giza pyramids? Here's a nuclear reactor with the rods. Here's the Khafre pyramid with its bizarre underground structures over there as well. Jesse Michaels, who hosts a great show. We played clips of an interview with him recently, interviewing Jake Barber from Skywatcher, the dude whose team broke free from the secret space program, and they're working on drawing UFOs down using psionic techniques and stuff. So he's saying this is fascinating. Any ideas as to what these cylindrical structures below the pyramids might serve as? Never end a sentence in a preposition. Jesse Michaels. Jason Wild posting, we all suspected it, but holy effing wow. A must watch. It's rotating on many posts right now. Buckle up. Let's take a look at this video covering the same phenomenon.
According to a recent press release, the Khafre pyramid, is the tip of a very large iceberg. So there was a big press release that came out of Italy, made by Corrado Malanga, Armando May, and Filippo Biondi. So this is a model of what they found, and
this is just more evidence for the theory that my whole saga is based around, that before the Great Flood, there was an advanced ancient civilization that had colonies all around the world. Call them Atlantis, call them Anunnaki outposts, call them whatever you want, but this is evidence that lends credibility to that theory.
You can see a structure within the Khafre pyramid, And then the amazing thing is you can see these structures that go down deep into the earth. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the information that's been released so far. Apparently there's going to be a lot more released fairly soon, but we'll just look at what we know so far. And I got this from Trevor Grassi's Facebook page. So thank you, Trevor. Much appreciated for keeping everybody up to date. So here's what we know so far. And we're getting this information from the abstract that was released on the 16th of March. Quote, this abstract summarizes the key points of our research, which aimed to clarify the possible hidden structures inside the second pyramid.
The second pyramid of the Giza Plateau, not the Great Pyramid, not Khufu's pyramid. This is Khafre's pyramid, to correct Jay Anderson.
Of the Giza Plateau, known as the Khafre Pyramid. This research was conducted using non-invasive techniques based on publicly available synthetic aperture radar, i.e. SAR, data, provided as open source by Capella Space.
This is cool because I've heard rumors about this technology that where they can use satellites and literally look through the ground to pretty extreme depths. I've heard about this for years and years and years. People were requesting it to look into the cemetery of giants in New Zealand, where there's supposed to be like 36-foot tall giants buried in the ground. But now it's being unveiled for this. This is nuts, man.
And Umbra, and there's some websites associated with that. It then goes on to describe the first step that was taken before this, which was the project to scan the Khufu pyramid and a few of the results of that. In fact, I did an episode on this when the information came out, and I've since updated it. So you'll see on my channel there's a fairly recent version of that as well. So let's just keep looking at what the new stuff is. The tomographical images obtained from the satellite data processing immediately highlighted the presence of 5 structures located at the center of the pyramid.
And each of those 5 structures resemble the Egyptian idea of the Djed and look exactly like the structure of the king's chamber, quote unquote, where no body was discovered in the Great Pyramid, with its, quote, relieving chambers over the top. Diagonal, gabled stone blocks, granite, with a series of layers underneath, with cavities in between. And they're weird. The bottom of the blocks for each of the layers are perfectly flat, but the upper sections are wavy and non-uniform. The theory is that they were chipped strategically to resonate at certain frequencies as part of the frequency manipulation process of the Great Pyramid, turning kinetic energy into sound waves and microwaves.
Above Belzoni's chamber, which contained a presumed sarcophagus, mistakenly believed to be the pharaoh's tomb. The abstract paper then goes on to say that these structures share the same shape as the so-called Z structure found inside the pyramid of Khufu, above the ceiling of the so-called pharaoh's or king's chamber. The 5 Zs in the Khafre pyramid appear to be connected by geometric pathways, and alongside these structures, additional secondary structures are visible from various satellite angles, as shown in some of the tomographical images. The analysis of this data, obtained using entirely non-invasive techniques, are briefly summarized. These findings allowed us to construct a 3D model of the
not only advanced ways of cutting stone very, very precisely to within tolerances of 2/10,000ths of an inch. If you look at the descending shaft of the Great Pyramid, which goes from the exterior of the pyramid all the way down to the subterranean chamber, it goes for like 100-something feet without straying more than a couple 10,000ths of an inch measured by lasers. How did they accomplish that? You find this extreme precision all over Egypt. You find super, super flat surfaces, things we couldn't accomplish until the 20th century. Here, currently, modernly, you see extreme symmetry on the design of like the Ramses II bust at the Luxor temple. Geometry that's not only symmetrical horizontally, but three-dimensionally symmetrical, and lines up perfectly with golden circle ratios and stuff. I discussed that in my book series as well. Let's continue.
The entire complex. The examination of dozens of tomographical images obtained from different angles using Capella space and Umbra radars enabled a 3D reconstruction of most of the objects inside the Pyramid of Khafre. Below, we present some images from our 3D analysis. The analysis of the structures above Belzoni's chamber are intensely coloured spots which can be observed appearing in all tomographic images taken from different angles corresponding to the internal artificial structures. On the next page, it says that improvements of the signal-to-noise ratio revealing the internal structure of the 5 Zs, consisting of 5 horizontal levels and a sloping roof. So this is the raw pictures of the data that they used to create their model. And this is the model. So it reads the tomography with another cross-sectional line showing the presence of vertical structures. And if you think that was pretty mind-blowing, it then goes on to say, as observed in the 3 model below the ground level, so ground zero of the main structure, vertically aligned cylindrical structures extend for hundreds of meters beneath the Giza plateau. Notably, 8 of these structures, arranged in 2 parallel rows from north to south, descend to a depth of 648 meters, merging into 2 large cubic structures measuring approximately 80 meters per side.
What the hell,
These
man?
features are illustrated in the topographical images and models presented. The paper then adds to that with some even more interesting detail, which is that the 8 cylindrical structures that have been identified in the tomographical image appear as vertical wells, which are hollow inside and surrounded by descending spiral pathways.
Just like that Templar site in Sintra, Portugal, hollow shaft, vertical shaft with spiral pathway going around. Did these ancient Templars have relics of this knowledge, little bits and pieces? Were they trying to recreate it for some purpose? Could these have been wells? There's evidence that there's massive waterworks operations that were going on at Giza. The pyramids used to have retaining walls and moats. There are tunnels that extend from the Giza Plateau some 50 miles south to the former location of the Lake Morris that allegedly served as ducts bringing water from Lake Morris to keep the pyramids functioning. Could this have been a storage area for water during dry seasons that they can then pump up these 8 shafts? Who knows, man? Who knows?
It then goes on to describe the third step, which is a lot of the analysis they've done based on all this data that they've collected. So they say the next phase involved analysing the tomographic data to determine the full extent of the underground structures beneath the Giza Plateau. The tomographic images clearly reveal that the structures exist beneath the plateau, extending below the pyramids of Khafre, Khufu, and Menkaure, for approximately 2 kilometers below ground. So mind-blowing as all that is, there's still more to come, and this is just a little bit of the information that they have shared with us so far. So we can look forward to a lot more to come out fairly soon, and I will keep you posted. In the meantime, this is a look at some of the models and some of the data.
Crazy stuff. JJRSVL saying he's up to page 79 of my series, The Core Saga. Good screen script so far. I can imagine it getting better and better. Yeah, it just keeps getting crazier and crazier and crazier, JJR. Real crazy. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. Grok gave it an 11 out of 11 for the concepts that are included throughout the whole story. Let's see what else we got over here in terms of people commenting and reacting on this. So this is a kind of funny one. So this is a thing now. Structures have been detected below the pyramids. This could change everything. This is a meme that's been going on forever, as if the tips of the pyramids are just the peaks of giant obelisks. And interestingly, it looks like there are giant structures going vertically down, at least underneath the middle pyramid over there, which is completely insane. Let's check in with funny old world Johanna Johansson over here. I can't remember her full name, but let's see what she's got to say.
You are literally not going to believe what they've just found underneath the Khafre, the middle pyramid in Giza. I can't believe it myself, but I'm going to show you. There was a press release yesterday in Italy from Filippo Biondi and Corrado Malanga. They have written a paper which has got all the results of their synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography, which is a SAR radar scan. So basically using sound waves, I believe, they have scanned deep inside the middle pyramid and all underneath the structure. And then from the results, they are able to create like 3D models of what they think the sound waves are showing. And I can't talk, I'm so excited. So underneath the pyramid, they have found 8 huge cylindrical structures that are aligned perfectly in twos, and there's 4 pairs of them, and they go deep into the earth. So this is the 3D recreation of what the SAR scan shows. So you can see these 8 cylindrical pillars that go deep down, and then each pillar is surrounded by like a circular path or walkway or tube. Okay, this is not all. This is the beginning of it. Not only that, at the very base of the pyramid, like ground zero of the pyramid in the center, they have found 5 of these kind of stacked chambers, which are identical, look like they're kind of identical in size and form as the king's chamber of the Khufu pyramid, the one next door. So these are made with huge blocks of granite, red granite that was brought hundreds of miles away to the Giza plateau and stacked very specifically in this sort of horizontal sandwich with a convex, oh my gosh, what's the roof? The roof's on the wonk, there we are. A vaulted ceiling, I'm way too excited. So 5 of them, 5 of these chambers just chilling in the middle of the pyramid, and then 8 cylindrical, massive underground structures that go deep down. And what is under that? I'll show you. So 4 of these cylindrical structures dropping deep down into the earth, they go into 2 square sort of chambers, 2 square empty spaces, which are 80 meters by 80 meters wall to wall. Each of these square chamber walls
80 meters by 80 meters by 80 meters. It's a cube, not a square. That's freaking nuts, dude. Giant voids. 2 kilometers down.
80 meters identically all the way around. Perfect square chambers.
How this relates to everything that's going on now. This is important, man. If we discovered that there was an antediluvian, massive, advanced civilization spanning the entire globe, and it's been systematically kept a secret with the destruction of evidence and collusion between academics around the world, as it seems to be, this could change the way people view reality and the planet and our human history as a whole. Who knows how old this is? This could go back tens, hundreds of thousands of years, potentially. Who knows, man? Millions of years. Anything is possible at this point.
With 4 cylindrical shafts going into them, or pillars, whatever they are, cylindrical structures, with winding, coiled, maybe a walkway. We're not exactly sure. This is just what is showing up from the scans. Oh, and I'm sorry, did I tell you how deep these cylindrical tubes go under the pyramid? 648 meters. 648 meters under the main pyramid. And then you hit the 80-meter 2 chambers, and then this is a map of the whole of the Giza plateau. So in the center, wait, I'm going to move. This here is the chambers that are in the center pyramid. the cylindrical chambers going down to whatever's going on 648 meters down here, there is evidence that there are more structures that go on for 2 kilometers underneath the Giza plateau, all interconnecting underneath all 3 pyramids.
Spoiler alert, my characters in my books discover access to a lot of these chambers, which have been speculated to exist for a long time. There's theories that people knew that the Great Flood was coming and that they built places to survive deep underneath the Giza plateau. So it's not surprising to hear that the whole plateau is just riddled with hollows. There's all kinds of bizarre, anomalous shafts. We'd had an episode like a month ago where we were looking at these giant vertical shafts that just drop into seemingly infinity that you can see even from the surface, which is insane.
And apparently
Pam.
there's going to be more press releases. This is just the beginning. The team are going to do some more press. This is so very exciting. One thing I will say is that the idea that the pyramid was just a tomb for a dead pharaoh, why would you need 648 meters of perfectly aligned north to south pillars that go into an antechamber that then connect to an underground network of stuff? It's a bit excessive, isn't it? Just for a tomb. I'm going to be following this very closely, and if I find out anything more, I will bring you the information. I hope you have a fantastic day. Happy hunting.
So yeah, you dig down, Wiley, and then you dig up. And so you'd have an isolated capsule of a pocket that would not be able to be flooded if you were to dig down to survive a cataclysm like this. Let's see what else we got. More Jay Anderson. Here's one from Robert Sepper. Numerous ancient writers wrote about multi-leveled underground chambers beneath the pyramids and surrounding areas. Herodotus described a labyrinth with thousands of rooms, as well as massive subterranean chambers. The labyrinth described by Herodotus was at Hawara. Flinders Petrie excavated the area, believed that he had discovered the floor of the labyrinth, which Herodotus said there were 1,000 rooms above ground, 1,000 rooms below ground. He was only allowed access to the upper rooms, but he did enter it. He said that the great Egyptian labyrinth was so huge that it was larger than all of the Greek masterwork temples combined. It was allegedly built by Amenemhat III, who also created the canal system over at Hawara, which connects the Nile to the Fayum Oasis. They built this canal. It brought water into the Fayum Oasis, revitalizing and reclaiming tens of thousands of acres, which ended up being inhabited by Egyptians, where they worshipped Sobek, the crocodile deity, at Crocodilopolis nearby. But this is absolutely insane. Edgar Casey, the psychic, in 1929, I think it was, used remote viewing to claim that there was a chamber underneath one of the paws of the Sphinx containing a hall of records with all kinds of lost knowledge. Let's hop over to Robert Sepper for a couple seconds and see what he's saying in this video he linked to.
When ancient Egypt is mentioned, most people think of pharaohs. But there are many Egyptian mysteries that stretch back into pre-dynastic times, with underground secrets that predate the first Egyptian pharaoh and the pyramids themselves. In fact, numerous ancient writers wrote about multi-leveled underground cities beneath the pyramids and surrounding areas. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian who is known as the father of history, described an impressive labyrinth said to have contained thousands of rooms full of hieroglyphs and paintings, as well as an equal number of subterranean chambers heavily guarded and inaccessible to ordinary people. Herodotus wrote about the mysterious labyrinth, saying, "This I have actually seen, a work beyond words, for if anyone put together the buildings of the Greeks and display of their labors, they would seem lesser in both effort and expense to this labyrinth. Even the pyramids are beyond words, and each was equal to many and mighty works of the Greeks. Yet the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids."
The crazy thing is that it seems like Flinders Petrie was wrong. He didn't find the floor of the labyrinth, which he assumed he had found because there's just chipped stone all over the place. It looked like there had been a massive destruction that had taken place. And this is right beneath the pyramid at Hawara. There's a pyramid, and then there's this giant, directly south of the pyramid, this area that's supposedly inhabited by the Egyptian labyrinth. And recently, teams went in there with ground-penetrating radar, and they discovered a network of granite passageways resembling a labyrinth still in existence beneath the sand, beneath this giant cover stone, which apparently is a one massive stone that spans just like 100+ meters in multiple directions, covering the top of the labyrinth. It was so huge that Flinders Petrie thought he found the floor, but apparently he found the ceiling because the ground penetrating radar indicates that the labyrinth is still there. The problem is that after they built the Aswan Dam, they changed the water levels of massive areas in Egypt, so the whole area at Hawara now is logged with salt water that's flooding the labyrinth. The most potentially important discovery waiting to be found in all of human history is now flooded with salt water, and it's being potentially ruined. So that needs to be examined. And for some reason, Zahi Hawass and the Egyptian Antiquities Department will not let anybody go anywhere near it or do any excavations, just like how they've halted excavations at the pyramids, and they intervene when anybody tries to get any information regarding any of these mysteries. It's like there's an active cover-up going on.
There I saw 12 palaces, regularly disposed, which had communication with each other, interspersed with terraces and arranged around 12 halls. It was hard to believe they are the work of man. The walls are covered with carved figures, and each court is exquisitely built of white marble and surrounded by a colonnade.
And this is Herodotus. People take Herodotus pretty seriously. He's not just making this up, man.
Here, the corner where the labyrinth ends, there was a pyramid, 240 feet in height, with great carved figures of animals on it, and an underground passage by which it can be entered. I was told very credibly that underground chambers and passages connected this pyramid with the pyramids at Memphis.
So Memphis was the old name for Giza, also known as Rostau, mouth of the tunnels. So this is all connecting. Herodotus said that down at Hawara, 7 miles away from Giza, by the pyramid at Hawara, which is ruins now, that there was a labyrinth. There was an underground tunnel that connected the labyrinth to the pyramid, and that there were further underground tunnels that connected that whole entire structure to the Giza pyramids at Memphis, 7 miles away, lending credibility to the idea of large tunnels that can go for miles underground, which further lends credibility to the idea that there was an even larger tunnel that connected all the way over to Lake Morris, providing water to the waterworks and energy creation system that is the Giza Plateau.
Many other writers supported what Herodotus had written. One of them was Iamblichus of Apamea, a
Iamblichus, close though.
Syrian Neoplatonist philosopher who recorded in ancient times unprecedented information about an entrance into the Great Pyramid of Giza, leading directly from inside the body of the Sphinx.
And all of this is incorporated in my novel series, The Core Saga, just for the record.
This entrance, obstructed in our day by sands and rubbish, may still be traced between the forelegs of the crouched colossus. It was formerly closed by a bronze gate whose secret spring could be opened only by the Magi. It was guarded by public respect, and a sort of religious fear maintained its inviolability better than armed protection would have done. In the belly of the Sphinx were cut out galleries leading to the subterranean part of the Great Pyramid. Iamblichus further explained that the historic galleries were artfully decorated along their course towards the pyramid. If one were to travel into the passages without a guide, they'd inevitably return to the starting point. It's not clear whether the Egyptian temple was described as a labyrinth simply because it was so huge and so complex that one could easily become lost, or whether it was intentionally designed as a maze where one had to find their own way through it.
In my lore, in my book series, The Core Saga, the labyrinth was constructed by Amenemhat III and his descendants to house the golden capstone of the Great Pyramid, which was placed there for protection until it could one day be put back on top of the pyramid and the pyramid reactivated.
Ancient Greek historian Strabo also claimed to have visited the temple and wrote in his book, "Before the entrances there lie what may be called hidden chambers, which are long and many in number and have paths running through one another, which twist and turn, so that no one can enter or leave any court without a guide." Another Greek philosopher by the name of Crantor of the Old Academy, probably born around the middle of the 4th century BC, supported the writings made by Herodotus. Crantor suggested that there was an intricate set of underground pillars said to contain written stone records of prehistoric events. Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, 1st century BC, gives one of the most colorful descriptions. When one had entered the sacred enclosure, one found a temple surrounded by columns, 40 to each side, and this building had a roof made of a single stone, carved with panels and richly adorned with excellent paintings. It contained memorials of the homeland of each of the kings, as well as the temples and sacrifices carried out in it, all skillfully worked in paintings of the greatest beauty. Furthermore, writings of the 1st century Roman historian Pliny the Elder suggest that there were concealed chambers directly beneath the Great Sphinx of Giza. Pliny wrote about the existence of a tomb belonging to a ruler called Harmachis. Interestingly, it is believed that the Great Sphinx was once called the Great Sphinx Harmachis, who mounted guard since the time of the followers of Horus. More evidence is found in the manuscript.
Lions are the guardians of the underworld in Egyptian mythology. 2 lions, one facing east, one facing west. The Sphinx, the body of a lion, the head of a man, which may have been recarved considering the head is way too small in proportion to the rest of the body, may have originally been a lion head. There's another potential Sphinx on the Giza Plateau that faces west. So 2 sphinxes, two lions facing different directions could mark Giza as the entrance to the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, which could be a description of this network of tunnels and chambers that may have been created by some previous ancient civilization. Who knows, man?
Documented by Arab writer Altel M. Sani and preserved in the British Museum. He documented the existence of an extensive square underground chamber located below ground, between the Great Pyramid and the Nile River, saying that there was something enormous blocking the entrance. Altel Emsani wrote, "In the days of Ahmed ben Tulun, a party entered the Great Pyramid through the tunnel and found in a side chamber a goblet of a glass of rare color and texture. As they were leaving, they missed one of the party. Upon returning to seek him, he came out to them, naked and laughing, said, 'Do not follow or seek for me,' and then rushed back into the pyramid. His friends perceived that he was enchanted."
And the idea of this being some kind of electrical generation facility isn't completely out of the realm of possibility. Speaking of Iamblichus, who we quoted earlier, I previously played for you guys that video about the Ark of the Covenant functioning as a Leyden jar, which would suck electromagnetism from the atmosphere and store it to then be discharged as a weapon or as a power generation device. But Iamblichus described people going into a chamber and discovering when they entered the chamber, a glass tube lit up with artificial light, terrifying everybody that saw it, but also mystifying them. Eventually, one of them gained enough courage to go over and touch the artificially lit tube, and it went out, and they couldn't figure out how to restart it. That's more evidence of electricity being used in antiquity.
Upon learning about strange happenings under the pyramid, Ahmed ben Tulun expressed a desire to see the goblet of glass. During the examination, it was filled with water and weighed, then emptied and reweighed. The historian wrote that it was found to be of the same weight when empty as when full of water.
For something so ancient, Egypt's mysteries, you know, the stuff we've seen in movies and books, the pyramids, the tombs, the Sphinx, it never seems to stop amazing the modern mind, right? Well, there's new research now that's suggesting that there may be some new discoveries still to be made, maybe underground, right? Is this the real riddle of the Sphinx?
The study of the majesties of ancient Egypt goes back to the founding of Western science and archaeology. And while most of the major monuments along the Nile have been found and explored, there is no shortage of strange theories about their origins. Take, for example, the Sphinx. New research suggests there's a secret tunnel underneath the statue connecting it to one of Egypt's largest pyramids.
It seems like everything is connected. Let's hop over to Uncharted X, who did this really good video about the Great Egyptian Labyrinth, which shows the radar discoveries, the ground-penetrating radar, highlighting the granite tunnels discovered and shows how it's flooded and everything. This is messed up, man. Ben at Uncharted X. This dude kicks ass. Ben Kerwick. And I immediately, upon finding this information, I sent Christopher Dunn a message on Facebook saying, "Hey, have you seen this? Any idea what it's about?" Since he's the guy that reverse engineered the inner chambers of the Great Pyramid to propose that it was used as a power generation facility. Author of the book The Giza Power Plant and the follow-up, the Giza Power Plant Part 2. I can't remember what its actual title is. No response yet. Though we did see the message.
It is a rare thing for ancient historical mysteries to ever be fully resolved.
Yeah, the Spectre asking about the Dendara light bulb carvings. Dendara, where it was like they had a stronghold of the priests of light over there, and there are these carvings on the walls which resemble giant light bulbs with cables connected to jeds, which symbolize power for ancient Egypt, with these multiple layers here. Mimicking the relieving chambers above the Great Pyramid and those 5 new chambers that were discovered inside the Khafre Pyramid. Ancient light bulb with a big old filament on the inside connected to a power cable. Entirely possible, Spectre, entirely possible. And that makes sense with Iamblichus's accounting of finding a light that lit up when they entered a chamber in Giza as well.
Resolved. Great enigmas like the pyramids of Egypt seem to somehow resist the passage of time, unchanging as it flows around them, like boulders in the river of history. Occasionally, our civilization makes some small incremental progress. A new tomb is found, or some object discovered, destined to become yet another piece in a museum. 12 years ago, in 2008, a momentous discovery was made beneath the sands of Egypt. This discovery wasn't simply some small incremental step, but
this right here that is showing, this is the Valley Temple, which is connected by a causeway to the Khafre Pyramid, which is the subject of the new discoveries. I think that the causeway was an aqueduct that would fill this chamber, this temple full of granite, and would activate the vibrations in the granite would electrically charge the water. That's one theory, that they were creating like hydrogen fuel, HHO effectively. But if you look at this granite pillar right here, you see this crisp vertical edge, and then the lower parts of these columns are eroded and rounded. It looks like this was regularly filled with water. This chamber, this temple, which is the outer walls are made from 100+ ton limestone blocks that were extracted from around the Sphinx. Originally, the Sphinx was just one bulbous, stony protrusion, and they removed stone from around it, creating an area around what they turned into the body of the Sphinx. So the Sphinx wasn't carved except for its head. They extracted rock from around it. It was carved. It was not a natural formation. So there's this artificial Sphinx enclosure, and all the blocks that were around it were used to make the exterior walls of the Valley Temple here, which are so eroded We have no idea how old it was, but subsequent reconstructions were done with these massive granite stones all along the interior.
Represented rather a huge leap forward, an opportunity.
And they're fit together so well that, and with these bizarre polygonal shapes, someone mentioned in the chat earlier that they advanced methods of cutting stone. They may also have had methods of molding stone, because these blocks look like they were molded in place. They fit so perfectly, you can't even fit a hair between them.
Opportunity for historical exploration and learning, the likes of which we have
Alabaster
not witnessed
floor.
in a century or more. The great lost labyrinth of ancient Egypt had been found. This was a gigantic and mythical structure, said by some to have surpassed the achievement of the pyramids, a huge array of thousands of underground halls, temples, and chambers.
And this seems a lot more likely to be possible now that we have 2-kilometer deep, giant, massive structures discovered under Khafre. This is like nothing compared to that.
Dwarfing all known Egyptian temple sites several times over. Not simply just legend, either. This structure was visited and witnessed firsthand by the great historians of millennia past.
Yeah, there's theories that their acoustic levitation was used. There's stories of priests lining up stones on the ground and touching the blocks with rods, and the blocks would slide along. We have no idea how they did it, though, or even who did it, to be completely honest.
Yet ultimately was lost to the sands of the desert, and its physical presence remained unknown for more than 2,000 years. Unknown, that is, until 12 years ago. Despite this incredible discovery, there has been no global press coverage of it, and very few people are even aware that the mighty labyrinth of legend has indeed been found. The discovery was suppressed, and today the incredible potential of this site is being slowly and irrevocably destroyed by both inaction on the part of the authorities and by the water table in the area that's rising due to agricultural irrigation and the damming of the River Nile. My name is Ben. You're watching Uncharted X, and this is the story of the great lost labyrinth of ancient Egypt, now found. Located roughly 90 kilometers to the south of Cairo, this is Hawara, the location that has long been speculated to be that of the Great Labyrinth.
In the chat, we had Spectre bringing up, it was Mabel bringing up Wally Washington. He did figure out one way to lift giant stones using leverage and tipping back and forth to you tip it one direction, you put some stuff underneath the central pivot point to raise it a little bit higher, you put stones on one end, it tips the other direction, you build it up a little higher, you do it over and over and over. But that would take eons to do that for every block of these massive megalithic structures. So this is definitely an easy physics hack to lift large stones, but it's not feasible for large scale projects like the Great Pyramids, which in the 20 years that it was allegedly built by King Khufu, 22 years, if you include the rainy season and include nights, if they operated consistently for 20 years, they would have had to cut, move, shape, lift, and place a stone every 4 minutes for 20 straight years. 2.5 million blocks in the Great Pyramid alone, weighing an average of 4 tons apiece, and that doesn't even account for the red granite, which was mined at Aswan and transported 500 miles to Giza, then lifted 250 feet up to construct the only granite chamber in the Great Pyramid, which is the King's Chamber, and its relieving chambers above it. But here's a method.
To show you a demonstration of my Egyptian hoist.
Stones.
I call it my Egyptian hoist, or that's what I refer to it as, because I use the 2 angles of the Great Pyramid. The interior angle is 26-degree angle. It's just a simple 1 unit of rise and 2 units of run. The other angle is the outside angle I use from a ramp to hoist the blocks on. It's just a simple 3, 4, 5. It's close to 52 degrees. The 3 units of run, 4 units of rise, and the diagonal is 5 units. You also notice too, a simple roller I place to the top. this to redirect power. This 100-pound weight that I found I could hoist alone at the speed of 10 vertical feet in 6 seconds. This creates over half a horsepower. The other weight I'm working with
this
here
isn't even the
in my
one that I was thinking of.
demonstration is this 505-pound block. I mean horsepower.
There's
30
another
men
guy,
instead of
Edward
3,
Leeds
could
Scalman,
hoist over a 5,000-pound block.
who was like
at
a
this speed.
Scandinavian immigrant. He built Coral Castle in Florida, claiming he had figured out the secret of the ancient Egyptians as well, lifting 30-ton coral stones and placing them in precision fashions and under the cover of night, keeping his secret, his technique a secret. So nobody really knows how Edward Leeds Scalman did that either. I haven't seen this one before, but we're talking 70-plus ton stones transported 500 miles from Aswan and lifted Lithuanian, thanks Ma Bell, Lithuanian Edward Leeds Scalman. Yep. So I don't think this accounts for 70-plus ton stones moved 500 miles, but it is definitely a valid process.
I've visited this site on a couple of different occasions. Compared with Giza or any of the other well-known ancient Egyptian sites, there really isn't a lot to immediately take in. Some fragments of once mighty granite columns, carved in palm or lotus shapes, along with other small...
And sorry for interrupting again. This is the video that I had seen before of Wally Washington lifting large blocks using leverage.
Retired carpenter. About 5 years ago, I began a project. I refer to this as the forgotten technology. I first began with 1-ton blocks and soon realized in order to challenge myself, I could go much further. I do not use wheels, rollers, metal levers, and I also work alone. Presently, my main block is this 19,200 pounder, and I also use this 2,400 pounder as a counterweight. The technique is simple and could have evolved at different places and times throughout history. It also agrees with the laws of physics. This technology.
So this one, let's see. Here that's not the right one either. Yeah, here we go. This one probably shows the technique. Skim through. Yeah, here we go.
Giants is a whole different puzzle.
This is 19,200 pounds. Yeah, it's 128 cubic feet of concrete.
Today, Wally hopes to solve it. He'll put one of his theories to the test and try to stand this 19,200-pound block by himself.
I've tried to do this without any mechanical machinery at all. I've used mostly sticks and stones for my equipment. No pulleys, no hoist, no metal levers. Just try to use gravity too, I believe is my favorite tool.
So he tilts it, places something in the middle.
3 feet off the ground.
In order to move it up to this point, I just rock the block back and forth, adding weight to that end, and that opens a gap on this side, and just slide a board in. Then I add the weight to that end, there she goes, and slide a board in on this end.
This shoring box acts like a jack, slowly raising the block.
So you could slowly raise large blocks like that, lifting dozens and dozens of stones, 250 feet plus up in the air. Seems unlikely at a large scale in antiquity. And then you have to consider sites like Baalbek, where there are 1,000-plus ton stones cut from a quarry and moved over a mile to be placed into the foundation of the Baalbek megalithic structure, the Trilithon stones. Some stones that are still in situ over in the quarry weighing 1,500-plus tons, 1,200-ton stone of the mother, stone of the pregnant woman, etc. But yeah, this is definitely a way that you can lift large blocks. I don't think it's the most efficient way, probably not the way that the Egyptians used, especially considering the high precision evidence of advanced technology used in cutting stones. The Flinders Petrie core number 7, which was discovered at Giza. It's like a core block from a core drilling sample. It has cylindrical drill marks on it, and when you zoom in super close, granite is composed of a variety of different rocks, quartz, feldspar, etc. Quartz being the hardest. But when you zoom in real close at the spiral drill mark, it slices through the quartz like butter, and then struggles with the softer stones like feldspar, which it should have easily cut through, the exact opposite of what you'd expect from a physical tool, which would slice through the feldspar easily, then struggle with the quartz. So the theory is that they were using ultrasonic drills using sound waves tuned to cut quartz, which would cut through the quartz easily and then would struggle with the feldspar, which it wasn't tuned for. And the idea of using sound to cut also plays into the entire idea that the pyramid was used to transform kinetic energy into sound waves. The Egyptians seem to be masters of sound, interestingly, or whoever built these things. So let's jump back over to the labyrinth stuff.
Carved in palm or lotus shapes, along with other small fragments of ancient stonework, are left lying in a small open-air museum. The site is dominated by the remains of the pyramid of Amenemhat III, with only the broken down adobe mud brick internal structure remaining to see, although this was once a true pyramid encased in white limestone. The view from the top of the remains of this pyramid shows the other dominating feature of this site, the Bar Wabi Canal. The remains of the labyrinth have been discovered in the sandy areas to the south of the pyramid on both sides of this canal. And
interestingly, Mabel, some of the casing stones, they did studies on the Khafre pyramid casing stones, determined that they're geopolymer composites made from crushed limestone. They find little bits of seashells and stuff in them, and they took magnetic moment impressions of them and determined that their magnetic moments all point perfectly towards magnetic north, indicating that they were placed and cast and solidified in situ, so that on where they're placed, solidifying in situ, so to speak, so that their magnetic moments aligned as they solidified with magnetic north. So there is evidence that limestone at Giza was cast, casing stones cast out of limestone, which is nuts. And there's South American stories. I've looked it up before. I have notes on my phone from when I went to Ancient Aliens Live, but there are stories of using some kind of bird poop in South America that can soften stone. So you see these crazy megalithic structures with these polygonal joints and strangely shaped stones that fit together so well, and they kind of bulge at the edges, almost like they were placed there and then bulged a little bit as they settled and molded together. Really weird stuff.
Presumably underneath it.
The Geopolymer Institute did a whole big study in like 2006 or something about the Giza casing stones, and determined that at least casing stones in the Khafre pyramid were cast, which is wild.
The first
like
to find any real evidence of this was the great Flinders Petrie, who, in the late 1800s, discovered the remains of a huge stone foundation, more than 300 metres broad, in around 4 to 5 metres beneath the sand. He concluded that this was the remnants of the foundations for the labyrinth, with the structure itself being long since quarried and destroyed. However, new evidence collected in our modern times is challenging his conclusion, and it now seems likely that what Petrie found was not the foundation of the labyrinth, but instead was parts of the ceiling or the roof of the labyrinth's upper layers. We suspect this because these same areas were scanned in 2008 using ground-penetrating radar, as well as several other techniques, by the Matterhorn expedition, a collaboration between Egyptian authorities, the Ghent University of Belgium, and funded by contemporary artist Louis de Cordier. The results of this expedition clearly indicate the presence of grid-like and ordered structures deep
That's a
beneath the
labyrinth right
sand
there.
in levels much deeper than Petrie ever excavated. Huge walls of materials with a density akin to granite were detected over a wide area on both sides of this canal in depths exceeding 9 metres or around 30 feet beneath the ground. Although this expedition was conducted with the full cooperation and permission of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt, the official results and conclusion of this legitimate scientific study have never been released by the Egyptian authorities, and the expedition team members were deliberately silenced. Before we take a closer look at this expedition and what can be seen today at Hawara, let's first examine the history of this area and that of the labyrinth itself. Known today as Hawara, after the nearby village of the same name, this pyramid sits at the entrance to the Fayum Oasis, which is a large depression shown here by this green area, with Lake Moiris at its northern edge. The modern-day town of Medinet el Fayum was once known as Crocodilopolis, and also as the ancient town of Arsinoe, with its own rich history of archaeological finds. The depression of the Fayum Oasis is connected to the Nile River by channels and canals, and was regularly inundated with Nile water during each wet season. At least this happened before the Nile was dammed up and this seasonal inundation still took place. During the time of the dynastic Egyptians, it would have been an important agricultural zone, much as it still is today. The form of Lake Moiris itself may even be partially man-made. It was the subject of massive engineering projects undertaken by the pharaohs of the early Middle Kingdom. Flinders Petrie, who seemed more engineer than Egyptologist in a lot of ways, spent significant time exploring this area, and he wrote about the Fayum Oasis in his 1889 book entitled Hawara, Biamu and Arsinoe. Quoting Petrie from this book, quote, "So many opinions have been broached about Lake Moiris that an account of antiquities in the Fayum without mentioning it would seem impossible. The Fayum is one of the oases of the Libyan desert, lying close to the Nile Valley, and the intervening ground is low enough for the Nile to pour into the basin. The fall from the Nile Valley to where the channel widens out into the Fayum is about 12 feet, and the water flows over the province by canals and ravines, worn through the rock and its superincumbent mud, until the streams finally collect in the Birket Kurun at more than 200 feet below the Nile level, and indeed 130 feet below the sea. In prehistoric times, the Nile Valley was full of water to a far greater depth than at present. Probably 100 or 200 feet deep of water filled it right across. A river of such size seems almost incredible, and we naturally should suppose it to have been an estuary, but this must not be too hastily assumed, as there are evidences over the whole country of an enormous rainfall, which ploughed up the cliffs with great ravines.
Like the water erosion along the Sphinx enclosure, rounded, undulating erosion that can only be caused by the vertical drip of precipitation, and on a massive scale. Like there was a lot of water flow on the Giza plateau for some reason in antiquity.
This prehistoric,
maybe when it used to be a jungle, who knows?
High Nile is not, however, pre-human, as I found a Paleolithic flint high up on the hills to the west of Esne, clearly river-worn. The geologic conditions, then, in the prehistoric time prove that the Fayum Basin must have been a vast lake, connected by a broad arm with the Nile Valley. As the rainfall ceased and the Nile fell, the neck of water was reduced, but it still sufficed as a channel for the filling of the Fayum, in all probability, in the time of the earliest dynasties. It is pretty well certain that the Fayum Basin continued during the early dynasties to receive the inflow of the Nile as it had done for ages before. This, then, was the state in which the great engineering monarchs of Egypt found the province, a basin full of overflow Nile water, replenished at each inundation through a marshy, shallow inlet, and with much of its bottom so raised by deposits as to have become almost marsh ground, like the present lakes about the coast. Amenemhat I is the earliest king of whom we have any evidence in the Fayum. He appears to have reclaimed the site of the capital, Shed, quote, the separated or extracted, and thus he established, quote, the land of the lake, end quote. The work of Amenemhat III consisted in reclaiming more land and damming back the lake to narrower limits, while improving the canals which led in and out of it, so as to render it more effective in cooperating with the Nile. He thus established Lake Moiris, and his works gave him the credit of being its founder in later ages. End quote. It's interesting to note here Petrie finding evidences for massive flooding and rainfall across the country of Egypt, and I can't help but draw parallels with his work in the 1800s to the modern-day work of Robert Schoch and John Anthony West, who redate the Great Sphinx back into a time of great rainfall. There also seem to be connections here, I think at least, to the great floods and cataclysms of past ages, perhaps even to the Younger Dryas period of 12,800 years ago. A subject for a future video. The Pyramid of Hawara isn't the only thing of note that marks the Fayum. During Petrie's expeditions in the area, he explored many different sites, and he found the remains of several different structures, including one of Egypt's mighty colossi, of which only some small fragments were found, but they were enough to reconstruct the scale and approximate size of the statue. In this case, it would have stood around 50 to 60 feet high. Or
The two colossi of Memnon were reputed to, at least one of them, to sing as the sun would rise. They would emit some kind of sound. It was reported by historians over a long period of time. But something happened and the statue was damaged, and they stopped singing eventually, which is weird stuff, man. More weird sound stuff, allegedly by the Egyptians or whoever did it.
nearly 20 meters. And of course, this area has long been reported as the home for the gigantic labyrinth, a unique structure amongst all of the glories of ancient Egypt, and there have been several accounts of it over the millennia. These accounts have always placed it at or near the entrance to the Fayum Oasis. Although specific details differ, a consistent theme of ancient first-hand accounts of the labyrinth is that it was truly massive, along with being megalithic in construction, made up of a huge arrangement of precision-cut large granite blocks, all of which would have had to be transported north to the labyrinth from Aswan or from elsewhere in Egypt. It was supposed to have contained literally thousands of chambers and rooms, as well as a bewildering number of passages spread over multiple levels with giant columned halls that were dedicated to the full pantheon of Egyptian gods. The first recorded account we have of this structure outside of Egypt itself comes from Herodotus in the 5th century BCE. Even by this time, the labyrinth was already millennia old, as it is thought to have originated in the early parts of the Middle Kingdom, although I do suspect that its deeper levels and its origins extend far further back than that. In the second book of his history, Herodotus wrote of the labyrinth, quote, "Now they," meaning the 12 kings of Egypt, "determined to leave in common a memorial of themselves, and having so determined, they built a labyrinth a little above the lake of Moiris, situated near that called the City of Crocodiles. This I have myself seen, and found it greater than can be described. For if anyone should reckon up the buildings and public works of the Grecians, they would be found to have cost less labour and expense than this labyrinth, though the temple in Ephesus is deserving of mention, and also that in Samos. The pyramids, likewise, were beyond description, and each of them comparable to many of the great Grecian structures. Yet the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids. For it has 12 courts enclosed with walls, with doors opposite each other, 6 facing the north, and 6 the south, contiguous to one another, and the same exterior wall encloses them. It contains 2 kinds of rooms, some underground and some above ground over them, to the number of 3,000, 1,500 of each. The rooms above ground I myself went through and saw, and relate from personal inspection. But the underground rooms I only know from report, for the Egyptians who have charge of the building would, on no account, show me them, saying that there were the sepulchres of the kings who originally built this labyrinth, and of the sacred crocodiles. I can therefore..."
So when my characters discover the great Egyptian labyrinth in my story, they have to navigate ancient giant crocodiles to get to the golden capstone. And so since this was right by Crocodilopolis and there's that canal nearby in my lore, the labyrinth is connected to the canal so the crocodiles can come in and out. And crocodiles have negligible senescence, so they just keep growing and growing and growing unless something kills them. They're basically immortal. So my characters have to deal with giant crocodiles over there.
Therefore only relate what I have learned by hearsay concerning the lower rooms, but the upper ones, which surpass all human works, I myself saw, for the passages through the corridors and the windings through the courts, from their great variety, presented 1,000 occasions of wonder as I passed from a court to the rooms, and from the rooms to halls, and to other corridors from the halls, and to other courts from the rooms. The roofs of all of these are of stone, and also are the walls, but the walls are full of sculpted figures. Each court is surrounded by a colonnade of white stone, closely fitted, and adjoining the extremity of the labyrinth is a pyramid, 40 orgae in height, on which large figures are carved, and a way to it has been made underground." End quote. Diodorus Siculus, another ancient Greek historian, further wrote of the labyrinth in his Bibliotheca Historica, roughly around the year 50 BCE. Quote, "When the king died, the government was recovered by Egyptians, and they appointed a native king Mendes, some who call Mares. Although he was responsible for no military achievements whatsoever, he did build himself what is called the labyrinth as a tomb, an edifice which is wonderful not so much for its size as for the inimitable skill with which it was built. For once in, it is impossible to find one's way out again without difficulty, unless one lights upon a guide who is perfectly acquainted with it. It is even said by some that Daedalus crossed over to Egypt, and in wonder at the skill shown in the building, built for Minos, king of Crete, a labyrinth like that in Egypt.
Yeah, that's the rumor that Daedalus, the father of Icarus, who had wings of wax and flew too close to the sun, Daedalus designed the labyrinth to house the Minotaur at Crete for King Minos, and it built it so complex that he could barely even escape it himself upon completion. But apparently, he was inspired by the great Egyptian labyrinth,
in which, so the tale goes, the creature called the Minotaur was kept. Be that as it may, the Cretan labyrinth has completely disappeared, either through the destruction wrought by some ruler or through the ravages of time. But the Egyptian labyrinth remains absolutely perfect in its entire construction down to my time. And, seized with enthusiasm for this enterprise, they strove eagerly to surpass all their predecessors, while in respect of carving and other works of craftsmanship, they left no room for their successors to surpass them. For, when one had entered the sacred enclosure, one found a temple surrounded by columns, 40 to each side, and this building had a roof made of a single stone, carved with panels and richly adorned with excellent paintings.
Had a roof of a single stone, one giant stone covering the entire upper layer of the labyrinth. That giant stone is what Sir Flinders Petrie allegedly hit and thought it was the floor of the labyrinth, but it was really the top. And now the ground-penetrating radar studies show that the granite tunnels and passageways still exist, but they're flooded by salt water, damaging everything. All the paintings and stuff are probably ruined at this point. It's possibly the greatest crime against humanity of all time.
End quote. Strabo, another ancient Greek historian, also mentions the labyrinth in his works, written during the 1st century BCE.
Night, brother.
He talks of the immense size and complexity of the structure, also of its megalithic origins, with huge single stones making up its construction. Strabo writes that, quote, "hidden chambers which are long and many in number and have paths running through one another which twist and turn, so that no one can enter or leave any court without a guide. And the wonder of it is that the roofs of each chambers are made of single stones, and the width of the hidden chambers is spanned in the same way by monolithic beams of outstanding size, for nowhere is wood or any other material included." End quote. Pliny the Elder, a Roman author of the 1st century AD, also visited the labyrinth, and he wrote of it in his natural history books. Quote, "Let us speak also of labyrinths, quite the most extraordinary works on which men have spent their money, but not, as may be thought, figments of the imagination. There still exists, even now in Egypt, in the Heracleopolite Nome, the one which was built first, according to tradition, 3,600 years ago. At any rate, that Daedalus used this as the model for the labyrinth which he built in Crete is beyond doubt, but it is equally clear that he imitated only 1/100th part of it, which contains twisting paths and passages which advance and retreat, all impossible to negotiate. The Egyptian specimen, to my considerable astonishment, has its entrance and columns made of Parian marble, while the rest is of Aswan granite, such masses being put together as time itself cannot dissolve, even with the help of the Heracleopolitans, for they would have regarded the building with extraordinary hatred. It would be impossible to describe in detail the layout of that building and its individual parts, since it is divided into regions and administrative districts which are called nomes, each of the 21 nomes giving its name to one of the houses. A further reason is the fact that it also contains temples of all the gods of Egypt.
So in my story My characters use secret Navy prototype ground penetrating radar technology captured from the Nazis after they captured it from the Austrians in real life who had developed it in the 1920s. And they cut a hole in the ceiling of the labyrinth and go down. And the labyrinth is so complex that they don't want to get lost. So I drew upon the legend of Theseus, who used a golden thread given to him by the princess, the daughter of Minos, to navigate the labyrinth and find his way back out using the golden thread after slaying the Minotaur. In my story, they set up a series of winches with wires, and each little exploration team is connected to a winch and to a wire, and they go off out in all different directions. And all of a sudden, one of the winches starts spinning like a fishing reel, letting out line as a fish drags out line. And they're like, "What the hell is that?" And the line goes taut, and it gets full tension, and then it goes slack. And they're like, "What the fuck?" So they follow the trail of the winch wire and discover like a big bloody mess. And they follow the bloody mess, and they find the crocodile lair and the golden capstone lurking down in there to be discovered that they need to restart the pyramids.
Men are already weary with travelling when they reach that bewildering maze of paths. Indeed, there are also lofty upper rooms reached by ramps and porticos, from which one descends on stairways which have 90 steps each. Inside are columns of imperial porphyry, images of the gods, statues of kings, and representations of monsters. Certain of the halls are arranged in such way that as one throws open the door, there arises within a fearful noise of thunder. Moreover, one passes through most of them in darkness. There are again other massive buildings outside the walls of the labyrinth. They call them the wing. Then there are other subterranean chambers made by excavating galleries in the soil. End quote. There are several more mentions of this great labyrinth throughout recorded history, but at this point it's enough to say that we have several verified and trustworthy eyewitness accounts of it to verify that it both existed and must have been utterly awe-inspiring to look upon and explore. It's worth noting that Herodotus clearly states that the labyrinth exceeded the works of the Greeks and the achievements of the pyramids. Both the Great Pyramid at Giza and the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, which Herodotus mentions specifically in his account, are listed as two of the wonders of the ancient world, yet the majesty of the labyrinth is said to have exceeded them. There are a couple more accounts in more modern times that discuss the site from the late 17th century right up until the turn of the 19th century, including Napoleon's famous expedition, which also visited Hawara. However, it's not until Flinders Petrie established himself at the site that we first get any real modern evidence for the existence of the Great Labyrinth. It is true that Hawara had been extensively quarried and pillaged by the time Petrie arrived on site in 1888. It's why there's nothing left of the casing stones of the pyramid or of anything else, but given the depth of the labyrinth, much of what had been unearthed in the sands near the pyramid were the remains of the Greek-Roman structures that had been built on the surface above it. There is also a huge cemetery or necropolis established next to the pyramid, as was the habit of the later Egyptian and Ptolemaic periods, with tombs being dug on top of the labyrinth structure. This cemetery also extended to the area north of the pyramid. Petrie spent 2 seasons at Hawara, in 1888-89 and then again in 1910-1911. Although he was primarily interested in the pyramid there, he spent the majority of his time excavating in the area of the labyrinth. He did successfully find and map the internal chambers of the pyramid, chambers that are not accessible today due to the much higher level of the water table. I'll take a brief look at this pyramid and Petrie's work here as a follow-on video to this one. In 1889's Hawara, Biamu and Arsinoe, Petrie wrote the following about his investigation into the labyrinth. Quote, "This site, named from the village of Hawara nearby, was the principal ground for my excavations during 1888. I do not propose to state here any of the work which I did at the pyramid, as that is still incomplete, the chamber being found, but not yet entered. The most ancient subject for our attention, then, is the site of the labyrinth. By all authors, it is described as being close to a pyramid, and the only pyramid anywhere between the mouth of the canal and Arsinoe is that of Hawara. How far, then, will the remains at Hawara agree with the descriptions of the magnitude and importance of the labyrinth? We read of the enormous extent of the buildings, and of their exceeding in vastness all the temples of the Greeks put together, and that they even surpassed the pyramids. Of the beauty and magnificence of the work we cannot now judge, as almost every stone has long since been broken up and removed. But the extent of the area we can measure, as marked out by the immense bed of chips of fine white limestone, which lies on the south of the pyramid. Wherever we dig down, we find a bed of flat laid sand, or of beaten made of chips of stone rammed down, on which to lay the pavement and walls of some enormous building, and over that lie thousands of tons of fragments of the destroyed walls. On tracing these signs to their limits, it is found that they cover an area about 1,000 feet long and 800 feet broad.
Huge.
These mere figures will not signify readily to the mind the vast extent of construction, but when we compare it with the greatest of other Egyptian temples, it may be somewhat realized. On that space could be erected the great hall of Karnak, and all the successive temples adjoining it, and the great court and pylons of it, also the temple of Mut, and that of Khonsu, and that of Amenhotep III at Karnak, also the two great temples of Luxor, and still there would be room for the whole of the Ramesseum. In short, all of the temples on the east of Thebes, and one of the largest on the west bank, might be placed together in the one area of the ruins at Hawara. Here we certainly have a site worthy of the renown which the labyrinth acquired." End quote.
And it still exists.
Despite turning over a good portion
And they won't
of an
let us
acre
in.
worth of sand and examining every chip of stone, Petrie only found a few fragments of worked and inscribed granite at that site. These few pieces of pillared columns are likely the ones still viewable on the site today, giving only the barest clue to the majesty that must have once existed here. Importantly, however, Petrie here states the massive scale of the structure, some 1,000 feet long by 800 broad, or 304 meters by 244 meters in metric. It would be enough to fit 12 regulation-sized soccer fields in this space and still have room left over to spare. In another of Petrie's books, 1892's 10 Years Digging in Egypt, Petrie summarizes the work he conducted and the mind-boggling scale of the remnants he found at Hawara. Quote, "Though the pyramid was the main object at Hawara, it was but a lesser part of my work there. On the south of the pyramid lay a wide mass of chips and fragments of building, which had long been generally identified with the celebrated labyrinth. Doubts, however, existed, mainly owing to Lepsius having considered the brick buildings on the site to have been part of the labyrinth. When I began to excavate, the result was soon plain, that the brick chambers were built on top of the ruins of a great stone structure, and hence they were only the houses of a village, as they had at first appeared to me to be. But beneath them, and far away over a vast area, the layers of stone chips were found, and so great was the mass that it was difficult to persuade visitors that the stratum was artificial and not a natural formation. Beneath all these fragments was a uniform smooth bed of beaten or plaster on which the pavement of the buildings had been laid, while the south side, where the canal had cut across the site, it could be seen how the chip stratum, about 6 feet thick, suddenly ceased at what had been the limits of the building. No trace of architectural arrangement could be found to help in identifying this great structure with the labyrinth, but the mere extent of it proved that it was far larger than any temple known in Egypt. All the temples of Karnak, of Luxor, and a few on the western side of Thebes might be placed together within the vast space of these buildings at Hawara. We know from Pliny and others how for centuries the labyrinth had been a great quarry for the whole district, and its destruction occupied such a body of masons that a small town existed there. All this information and the recorded position of it agrees so closely with what we can trace that no doubt can now remain regarding the position of one of the wonders of Egypt." End quote. Ultimately, Petrie had to rely on an analysis of the ancient accounts of the site in order to build a picture of what the labyrinth may have looked like. In his words, he described the structure as a collection of massive halls, courts, and chambers, with columns in both the peristyle and hypostyle forms, each single court the equivalent of the massive temples like Luxor or Karnak that are visited by millions of tourists each year. Ultimately, his conclusion was that there is nothing left of the structure itself, that it had long since been quarried down to its roots, and only these ancient accounts of it remained.
But he did not have ground-penetrating radar, guys.
This then was the situation of the Great Labyrinth of ancient Egypt. It was thought to be lost to the sands of time and to the efficient quarrying of millennia, at least right up until the Matterhorn expedition of 2008. Matterhorn translates to labyrinth in Arabic, and this was a collaboration between the NRIAG, which is the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics of Egypt, along with the Ghent University of Belgium, and Louis de Cordier, an artist and entrepreneur who, through his COSCO Foundation, funded the expedition. They worked in partnership with and with the permission of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, at the time headed by Dr. Zahi Hawass. Using a combination of techniques, including ground-penetrating radar, electrical resistivity tomography, and very low-frequency electromagnetic mapping, they extensively surveyed 2 areas to the south of the pyramid on either side of the Bar Wabi Canal. The results of this scan are quite astonishing. In the first 4 meters of sand, there are the remains of the Ptolemaic and Roman-era structures. And at 5 meters, just below where is the current water table, we find the slabs that Petrie mentions, although he believed these were the remnants of the foundations of the labyrinth. It's only once we get to the deeper levels, 6 to 9 meters below the surface, that the other structures appear. You'll also notice the level of the current water table on this graph. It hasn't always been this high, it's only in the last 50 years or so that it's risen to this point. We can demonstrate this by returning to the pyramid here, which does have a megalithic descending passageway underneath the primitive mud brick structure that's on the surface.
So it only flooded in the past 50 years, which means my characters in 1947 have the ability to go down in there before it flooded. That's going to make an exciting scene.
Flinders Petrie found this passageway and penetrated the chamber that this connects to, but today, only a short distance down this passage, we're stopped by the level of the water table. This isn't due to the canal, which was also there in Petrie's time, but rather due to an effect of the damming of the Nile River by the Aswan Dam. This dam removed the 9-month-long dry season that happens each year, and along with the increase of agricultural irrigation in the area, has contributed to the much higher level of salt water, which is now found only some 4 to 5 meters beneath the surface. You can see the effect this salty water is already having on the stone of this passageway, and that's the reason that action is really needed on this site. If we as a civilization wish to preserve and learn from the remains of such a mythical and epic structure as a labyrinth, we need to act, as it's currently being eroded and destroyed by the water table. A mapping of the results of the very low frequency testing at around 8 meters depths shows what can only be interpreted as structures, with the different colors representing different materials and also possibly voids, arranged in a grid-like pattern. These walls are said to have the characteristics of granite, which matches the historical accounts of the labyrinth.
It's too geometric to not be the labyrinth. This is the labyrinth. It's right there, and it's fucking flooded, man.
Surely then, such a discovery as this, the finding of a lost and mighty achievement of the ancient world, should have echoed around the globe. After all, only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world is still standing, the Great Pyramid. So strong evidence of something that is comparable to that achievement, if not exceeding it, something that has been lost to humanity for thousands of years. Surely this is worth the world's attention. This discovery was only met with resounding silence. Although the results of the expedition were communicated at a public lecture at Ghent University in 2008, and they were reported in the paywalled journal of the NRIAG, it was never ever made public. Why is this the case? In 2010, 2 years after this happened, a website was established by the expedition leader, and although it too is now gone from the internet, the information remains available for those that want to search for it, via the COSCO Foundation and also by the Wayback Machine, the Great Internet Archive. Quoting directly from this now extinct website, quote, "The conclusion of the Hawara Geophysics Survey is, however, still waiting to be internationally released by Dr. Zahi Hawass, the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt."
That dude is dirty, man. Zahi Hawass shuts down everything. He's enemy of humanity, in my opinion.
Since the release of the scan results at the Ghent University public lecture, Dr. Zahi Hawass requested to stop communicating our results, intimidating the Matterhorn expedition team members with Egyptian national security sanctions. After 2 years of patience, we decided on June 2010 to oppose all cunning and deceit by posting the conclusions on the labyrinthofegypt.com website. End quote.
Good for them.
While the labyrinthofegypt.com website doesn't actually exist any longer, you can still find the paper about the Matterhorn expedition at the COSCO Foundation website. Its conclusion, at least in part, reads, quote, "The Matterhorn expedition geophysic research confirms the presence of archaeological features at the labyrinth area south of the Hawara pyramid of Amenemhab III. These features, covering an underground area of several hectares, have the prominent signature of vertical walls on the geophysical results. The vertical walls, with an average thickness of several meters, are connected to shape nearly closed rooms, which are interpreted to be huge in number. Consequently, the Geophysics Survey, initiated with the permission of Dr. Zahi Hawass, the President of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, and conducted by the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics from Helwan in Cairo, with the support of Ghent University, can now officially verify the occurrence of big parts of the labyrinth as described by the classic authors at the study area. End quote. The expedition papers go on to recommend further ground scanning surveys and the immediate initiation of action to begin to improve the drainage on the site and alleviate the corrosive salty water that is undoubtedly destroying the remnants of this structure right down to today.
And Zahi Hawass did nothing and just allowed it to continue.
Once this has occurred, large-scale excavation could feasibly begin, and Hawara could progress from being a site that is rarely visited by tourists to one that becomes a major attraction for Egypt, right up there with Giza and Saqqara as just incredible examples of the ancient world. The story, however, doesn't end quite here, as in recent years there have been significant technological developments that have provided some additional proof of a structure deep beneath the sand at Hawara. In the last decade, the advent of space-based archaeology has come along in leaps and bounds. There are now various companies that tout their ability to make archaeological discoveries, find shipwrecks, map minefields, and much more by using satellite-based infrared and other ground-penetrating techniques. According to the COSCO Foundation, in 2015, the site was scanned by Merlin Burroughs' Land Deep Scan technology, and in 2017, another high-definition satellite scan survey was conducted by the Origin company. While both the results of these scans and of any real information on how these technologies work seems to be hard to come by, it does seem to be a legitimate field, and there are a couple of decent documentaries about the topic, even one narrated by Brendan Fraser on the Discovery Channel from around 7 years ago that's entitled Egypt, What Lies Beneath. This technology uses a combination of infrared scans along with high-definition photography, and it works only in fairly shallow depths and then only in compatible mediums like dry desert sand.
So if you guys are just tuning in, the reason we're talking about this is because of the massive discoveries that have just taken place at Giza using this space-based satellite tomography type technology to scan deep under the plateau, discovering massive structures that stretch down 2 kilometers. 2 kilometers. Let's check out Greg Reese's report about this, and then we'll move on to different topics. Hope you guys enjoyed that little excursion to talk about the lost Great Egyptian Labyrinth, but it was thought to be a myth for a long time. So the fact that we're now discovering these massive structures under the Khafre pyramid, that pyramid in Giza, lends credibility to the idea of the existence of these absolutely astronomically massive, colossal stone projects accomplished somehow in antiquity. Here's Greg Reese's report on the new discoveries.
Corrado Malanga from the University of Pisa and Filippo Biondi, involved in radar and remote sensing research with the University of Strathclyde, published peer-reviewed research in 2022 via MDPI entitled Synthetic Aperture Radar Doppler Tomography reveals details of undiscovered high-resolution internal structure of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Their research was conducted using SAR data, synthetic aperture radar, along with proprietary software developed by Filippo Biondi that transforms the radar signals into phononic information, which allows for the detection of millimetric vibrations. This cutting-edge technology is capable of revealing underground structures invisible to traditional methods.
So you could set off a little TNT on the surface, cause the ground to shake a little bit, and you'd be able to get really good readings from this technology.
And revealed internal structures never seen before. Having established their expertise in using SAR to explore pyramid structures non-invasively, a recent press release on their current project was released last Saturday. This March 15th press release summarized the key findings in the team's research of the second largest pyramid of the Giza Plateau.
So we need this team to go scan Hawara and look and see what they can find in terms of the lost Great Egyptian Labyrinth over there. That should be their next mission. Scan Hawara. Scan Hawara.
Known as the Khafre Pyramid. And what they found was astonishing. The analysis of dozens of tomographic SAR images obtained from different angles enabled the 3D reconstruction of inside the pyramid of Khafre and deep beneath the surface of the plateau. Near the base of the pyramid, 5 identical structures are seen, connected by geometric pathways. Inside each of these are 5 horizontal levels and a sloping roof. Below these 5 structures are 8 cylindrical structures, which appear to be vertical wells, hollow inside, and surrounded by descending spiral pathways. These 8 vertically aligned cylindrical structures, arranged in 2 parallel rows from north to south, descend to a depth of 648 meters, where they all merge into 2 large cubic structures, measuring approximately 80 meters per side.
What the
The
fuck?
entire structure extends approximately 2 kilometers beneath the surface and extends beneath all 3 pyramids of the Giza Plateau complex. Mainstream Egyptology tells us that the Giza pyramids were tombs for pharaohs Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, and that they were built around 2500 BC using ramps, sledges, and levers.
Boom. Yeah. Mabel, real quick. Yeah, the Michigan copper mines, that's a really interesting topic. It turns out that in antiquity, it looks like members of the Minoan civilization who built the labyrinth at Crete, allegedly Daedalus having designed it, it seems like they went to North America and mined billions of pounds of copper from mines in Michigan, transported them back over to Crete, Greece area, and fueled the Bronze Age of Europe using North American copper. They've done tests on the copper over there in Europe and determined that it came from Michigan, which is crazy. There's also an additional interesting thing connecting Cleopatra and Alexander the Great potentially to Illinois, which we've discussed before, and I've played videos. There have been reports of Greek/Egyptian artifacts being discovered in Illinois, possibly the final resting place of Alexander the Great. So good call bringing that up, Mabel. The Michigan connection to the European Bronze Age, one of the really interesting rabbit holes you can dive down. Really, really crazy stuff. Billions of pounds of copper extracted from Michigan before we even got there, man.
But the redundant mathematics in their construction, which include pi, the golden ratio, and the speed of light, along with the testimony of today's expert architects, suggests that the official story does not hold up. The massive underground structure revealed by the recent SAR data shows what appears to be a mechanical or functional system, and this has been hypothesized in the past. Nikola Tesla believed that the pyramids could harness Earth's natural frequencies. This arguably inspired his experiments in wireless energy transmission and scalar waves. In the Giza power plant, Christopher Dunn argued that the Great Pyramid was a power-generating machine using resonant and acoustic forces to convert mechanical stress into electricity. In the Giza Death Star, Joseph Farrell proposed that the Great Pyramid of Giza was a weapon of mass destruction.
What do you want to bet he's not going to mention Jamie Bouturf, though, and his reconstruction of the Great Pyramid, determining that it functioned mechanically as a maser, a hydrogen-powered maser. A maser is like a laser, but with microwaves. So you're shooting microwaves in a beam, and it connects to Christopher Dunn's research as well, and John Cadman and all these other guys. But I bet you Greg Reese isn't going to mention it here. Let's see.
Using a type of physics that he calls paleophysics to focus energy as a scalar weapon. The cylindrical wells could be conduits for energy or sound waves, and the cubic structures might serve as energy storage or stabilization units, akin to components in a large-scale weapon or generator. And the detection of vibrations in the pyramid's internal structures reflects all of these ideas. The Khafre project hopes to plan an excavation in order to discover more about this underground structure, but history shows that this will be very difficult to get approval for. Greg Reese reporting.
Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff. Let's check in with Christopher Dunn since we're on this topic now. Giza Power Plant. This is a presentation given around 2000 in Egypt, I believe. Actually, maybe not. I have a DVD of his production over in Egypt, but this covers most of the same stuff. Adventures Unlimited Conferences proudly presents Ancient Egyptian Technology, the Giza Power Plant, with Christopher Dunn. Christopher Dunn's the man! This is a long one, so we're not going to watch the whole thing, obviously, but it's cool nonetheless.
So our last speaker for today
David Hatcher Childress, you might recognize him. Some kind of ancient aliens.
is, in my mind, one of the great thinkers of our time who's finally solved the riddle of the pyramids. And in my mind, I've
Of
been
the
to
one
Great
pyramid, at
many
least.
times, read all those books, have a huge library. I've always been fascinated by it. And it wasn't until really I read Chris's book that I thought, okay, finally somebody's got the answers. And that is our next speaker, Christopher Dunn, the author of The Giza Power Plant. So let's have a nice warm welcome for Chris.
Well, thank you very much, David, and thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jennifer, for always being there at these conferences. I have a wonderful time with the World Explorers Club, Adventures Unlimited, and just recently I have found a new family in Body, Mind, Spirit Journeys, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But before I do, I'd also like to introduce to this lovely group my family, my wife, Gino, and my son Alex. I've got to give credit where credit is due, that the Giza Power Plant was just a tattered manuscript in my bottom drawer before I married Jean and before I met Jean. And we came together because I mailed it to her. She was living in Boston, up in New England, and I mailed her the manuscript, and she started to go through it. And I think ultimately we decided that in order to really give birth to this baby, we had to get married. So anyway, that's what we did, and until we did, the thoughts, the ideas, you know, they were a hodgepodge of chapters that were crafted, and Jean spent many hours working on the manuscript, fixing my commas, and because I always had too many of them, you know, typical Englishman. But anyway, that's my family in Danville, and of course the family that I recently became very fond of were Body, Mind.
So he proposes that the Nile sent water to the pyramids. The water rushed into the basement with the sub-chamber, which was reverse engineered by John Cadman, who built a small to scale replica, discovering that the subterranean chamber of the pyramid actually functions mechanically as a hydraulic ram pump, which would send vibrations up into the pyramid, causing hydrogen created in the queen's chamber to get excited and go crazy. That would go out and up into the grand gallery, where a series of Helmholtz resonator balls with decreasing diameters as they go up would stack waves on top of each other, taking low-frequency vibrations, turning them into high-frequency vibrations, which were then directed into the king's chamber through acoustic filters, the granite blocks that people proposed were to protect grave robbers from getting in there, which would cause the granite chamber to vibrate, activating the piezoelectric quality of quartz, which when compressed and decompressed emits an electromagnetic field. That electromagnetic field, when combined with hydrogen, creates microwaves, which could then collect at the top of the pyramid or be exported through the southern King's Chamber shaft. Two potential functions: one where you can output the microwave energy, another where the electrons collect up in the golden capstone, and then the pulse generator from the subchamber sends a microwave pulse upwards, creating a temporary bridge with the ionosphere to draw down terawatts of electricity. That's a really long presentation. I actually found the video, which was scrubbed off of YouTube for a while, from Jamie Bouturf, which nobody knows about, nobody talks about. This is how his explanation for the Giza the Great Pyramid at Giza as a hydrogen maser.
In 1989, Christopher Dunn published a book called the Giza Power Plant, in which he outlines how the Great Pyramid at Giza essentially used hydrogen resonator cavities, a hydraulic ram pump, and so forth to generate electricity from the piezo effect of granite.
So I took Bouturf's theory, Dunn's theory, Cadman's theory, and Jean-Pierre Houdin's theory, combined them all together to create a fully comprehensive model of the pyramid's functionality, which is like the centerpiece of my novel series, discovering that and getting it reactivated.
I'm going to go through pretty much most of all of this of what I just got through explaining, but the outcome of my hypothesis is considerably different than Christopher Dunn's. Where the electricity came from is completely different, and how they stored it is completely different. But I'm going to go into all of this in detail. So what is a maser? A maser is essentially a laser, but instead of using light, it uses microwave amplification. In this slide here, you see a hydrogen maser. This one only consumes about 90 watts.
For real, Monty.
They're very low power. It doesn't take a lot to run these things. And I'm going to get into more of that in just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a weird last name. Jamie Bouturf. Buturff. Double F at the back end of that for double emphasis. Later, Jurgen. Have a good one, bro.
Okay, let's first start with the hydrogen maser components. What does it take to create a hydrogen maser? The first thing you're going to need is hydrogen. Pure hydrogen in a lower energy state usually comes in the form of H2 molecules. So you got two hydrogen atoms bonded together.
And they found crystals, salt crystals, just riddling the entire surface of the Queen's chamber in the Great Pyramid, where no body was ever discovered. And it's been anomalous. Some people thought it may have been left over from the Great Flood, leaking in there and drying over and over until the whole area was encrusted with salt crystals. Christopher Dunn's theory is that they had two compounds, dilute hydrochloric acid and a zinc oxide, that were in the two shafts in the Queen's chamber, that would drip out slowly, combining, creating hydrogen with the byproduct of salt, which would explain the salt build up. Then the hydrogen would flow into the Grand Gallery and would be used in this maser creation.
The idea is that hydrochloric acid was poured down one shaft into the Queen's chamber, and the other supposed air shaft, a zinc solution, was poured down into the Queen's chamber. The resultant mix of these two was zinc chloride and H2 gas, or hydrogen gas. You see below there, you see where you've got two hydrogen molecules.
So there you go. Dilute hydrochloric acid, zinc solution, zinc chloride, or I guess the zinc solution, the zinc oxide that then is transformed into the zinc chloride salt and the hydrogen gas. Definitely not Karen. Thanks for joining us. Not Karen. Good to see you again.
Together, that's H2. They're together using a covalent bond. Right, these two hydrogen, or this hydrogen molecule, will need to be further split into hydrogen atoms for the maser to work. Okay, so the hydrogen molecule, the hydrogen gas, is moved into a discharge chamber where the H2 molecule is dissociated into hydrogen, pure hydrogen atoms. Those hydrogen atoms then move into a collimator, which narrows the particles or the waves. In the collimator, there's also a magnetic state selector, which as the particles become charged, the magnetic state selector allows the specific charged hydrogen atoms to move on to the microwave chamber, which is tuned to 1.42 gigahertz or 21 centimeters, or the 21 centimeter band.
So this is very interesting because when you create a hydrogen maser, the like a laser, you funnel the sound or the light waves through a tube, and with hydrogen, the way that it reacts with electromagnetism creates a 21 centimeter wide wavelength. So you have a 21 centimeter by 14 centimeter rectangular shaft that's called it's basically a duct for microwaves. You have them inside in your microwave device. Literally, if you open the microwave and look at one of the sides, you'll see a 21 centimeter by 14 centimeter square, and that's where the microwaves are coming out of. It just so happens that the southern shaft of the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid is that exact size. It was designed as a 21 centimeter hydrogen line. That's what it's called. There's even a cone filter at the opening of the shaft to funnel the microwaves into it, where they're then directed, and they could be used for anything. Who knows what they used them for? But what a coincidence that there just so happens to be a 21 centimeter hydrogen line perfectly designed to the right dimensions as the output shaft of the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. Shaft.
Today, this chamber can be made out of quartz or ceramic. It just so happens that the King's Chamber, which is what we're going to get into next, where this is moving, is also made out of quartz. Inside the microwave chamber, there needs to be a weak static magnetic field. And this has to be aligned with the axis of the flow of hydrogen atoms. In this weak static field, the magnetic chamber, there's a resonator pump, and this is what causes the microwave to form a beam. Okay, so these are the components of a hydrogen maser, and I will show you how all of this relates to the Great Pyramid at Giza. Okay, so now we have the Great Pyramid hydrogen maser, the components. As you can see on the left, hydrochloric acid is poured down one shaft into the Queen's Chamber. Zinc solution is poured down the other shaft and into the Queen's Chamber. And this is where you get your hydrogen, your H2 gas is formed in here. Now, researchers have shown that there are trace levels of zinc. They have found trace levels of zinc on the walls of the Queen's chamber here. Once the gas is formed, it moves horizontally down the shaft and into the Grand Gallery. The Grand Gallery is essentially a dissociation chamber. Now I'm going to get into all these different components.
So here's the Queen's Chamber, the hydrogen chamber. At the center here, the gas moves north, where it enters the Grand Gallery, which is a really weird structure, and then it gets pumped up and towards the King's Chamber, which is where the magic occurs, where the hydrogen combines with the piezoelectric granite to form microwaves.
Individually and in detail in just a minute. So you have hydrogen gas, or the H2 gas, goes into the Grand Gallery. It is disassociated into its individual hydrogen atom components. And at the very top, the Grand Gallery, you see, will have pure hydrogen at the top, and then from there it goes into the collimator. The collimator is essentially the antechamber going into the King's Chamber. From the collimator, it goes into the King's Chamber, where this chamber is actually tuned to 1.42 gigahertz or 21 centimeter band. And the stacked stone you see are the resonators. Those are singing stones that essentially forces the hydrogen and microwave beam upwards. All right, now how all this takes place down below, I'm going to show you that in just 1 second. But I wanted to just to show you the basic fundamentals of how a hydrogen maser would work as designed by the builders of the Great Pyramid. Okay, here we have the same cutaway of the Great Pyramid of Giza as drawn by John Cadman. What I'm going to discuss here is the hydraulic ram pump hypothesis and what this is all about and how this whole thing here works. In ancient times, there was actually a moat, a wall and a moat all the way around the Great Pyramid. And the idea is that water flowed down the descending passage into this compression chamber. A lot of you might know a term called water hammer, which if you've ever turned off the water faucet in your shower or at a sink, and you may sometimes hear a banging noise. That's called water hammer. Essentially, what the builders of the Great Pyramid were doing when they built all this was to create that same effect. Supposedly, there's a check valve here. Now, they say that this is a passageway that went to nowhere, but it's actually a granite check valve, and it does open up. So what happens is the water flows through here. When it builds up enough pressure, this thing will shut itself off, and as the water stops, it creates that water hammer effect, all right? And it creates what's a shock wave in this compression chamber that shoots up through the stone of the pyramid, ringing these 5 granite stones up here. And I'll get into detail about this in a minute.
And real quick, since we're talking about the hydraulic ram pump, here's a video from John Cadman, who created a 2-scale replica of the Giza Great Pyramid's subchamber and has it functioning as a hydraulic ram pump.
Harmonizing the Earth and probably transmitting those frequencies throughout the planet. It's now become knowledge that these standing stones, like at Stonehenge, at Karnak, that they actually do emit particular frequencies.
In Washington, John Cadman gave us a tour of his scale model pyramid pulse generator. This device works completely off a gravity feed and no power is required. The implications of this technology are great, including energy and agricultural benefits.
If it was the Great Pyramid, this would be the moat around it. That'd be the water level of the moat, is this kind of a step.
John Cadman's a cool guy, man. I've talked with him a bunch too. He sent me some secret stuff. Tests that were done inside of the King's Chamber that provided some bizarre results where you put in an energy input and you get more energy back out of it. That could be explained by the pyramid functioning as a coupled oscillator with the entire Earth. So you have the Earth and it's resonating naturally. They call it the Schumann resonance, the Schumann frequency. And when you have a vibrating body, if you put a smaller vibrating body on it and then you trigger the smaller vibrating body into motion, it leeches off the vibrations of the larger body. So the pyramid, as a coupled oscillator, would be constantly sucking energy out of the vibration of the Earth. That's another way that it cultivates energy. And so if you go into the King's Chamber and you sit there super quiet, you can notice that it's slightly humming, very, very quietly, without any input. 7.86-ish hertz. That's right, Shatter. So the King's Chamber hums without any input, even if you're just sitting in there. That's because once you set a coupled oscillator into motion, it stays in motion as long as the larger body continues vibrating. So you can hear it resonating as it siphons the vibrations from the entire Earth just by hanging out in the King's Chamber.
Static water level. And then there's just a pipe that feeds from that. Just down through here. So it just drops straight down in here. And then it's got the little room inside the cement casing. So it's pumping water right now over to the far side of the house, so about 400 feet away, and elevating it from here. And so this would be, in the Great Pyramid, this would be the dead end shaft here. This shaft here, and this would be the shaft here. It would go down to the Nile, which would just have a very simple valve in it. And so if you shut this, it changes the pressure, and it'll change this rate and the intensity.
So someone in the comments, Spectre, pointed out, yeah, the Schumann resonance, it's so low you can't hear it. It's way below the level of human audible hearing. But the King's Chamber, which is siphoning off the vibrations of the Schumann resonance, resonates at about 432-ish hertz. So you can actually, and there's multiple vibrations forming an F chord, F-A-C-E. So you can actually hear the vibration in the King's Chamber at the higher frequencies that are feeding off of the low frequency of the Schumann resonance. Another example of taking low frequency vibrations and transforming them into higher frequency vibrations, which is one of the main cruxes of Chris Dunn's Giza power plant theory.
Immediately. Whoever designed it, they used the back pressure to change
the pulse rate and the frequency and the amplitude to tune it for the pyramid itself, for the variations in the atmospheric pressure plus the temperature of the water, because the temperature of the water changes the viscosity of the water, and that changes the speed of the sound wave traveling through the water. So you have to have a simple way to tune it, and all you have to do would be slightly close a valve or open a valve. And you could tune the whole frequency of the building just by, it'd be a very simple valve, like a little screw valve. The pulse is what causes the engine to start running. It's for the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber is a freestanding, it's a crystal room because it's rose quartz granite. It's freestanding from the exterior limestone walls.
Yeah, there's like a few inches of open space around the entire King's Chamber, allowing it to vibrate freely without without being stifled and smothered by the rest of the pyramid, and as well as Monty, good night, brother. Semper Fi, good night to you and Chesty Puller, wherever he is. Boom! Thanks for joining us. But underneath the granite blocks of the floor of the King's Chamber as well, it's built on top of like an egg carton shaped node-based blocks. So there's like these nodes, and air can flow around and vibrate between the floor of the King's Chamber and the rest of the pyramid beneath it as well. So it's like a freestanding structure, like Cadman was saying there.
And it's
because it's
tuned.
made to vibrate.
So when you cause that to resonate, the whole King's Chamber would resonate all by itself. And that would cause the machine to start running.
This is technology that has been proven, that's been on this planet since before the end of the Ice Age. All the archaeological evidence points to that is pre-flood. And
Wiley saying just because the sub part of something vibrates does not mean the whole part vibrates. That's true. But in this case, the water goes down. It's vortexes around the subterranean chamber. It goes down through the waste shaft, bounces off of check valve at the end of that, and then the vibrations are sent back up the waste shaft, pounding against the ceiling of the subterranean chamber, which sends vibrations upwards directly into the Queen's Chamber, targeting and directing those vibrations to cause the hydrogen to vibrate inside of the Queen's Chamber.
that was 12,000 years ago. It was the flood. Energized water would increase the health of the plants, which we eat, increase,
etc. And unfortunately, it didn't really show the device functioning in this video, but there's a whole bunch of videos that show it. I mean, you could see it functioning, but it didn't really explain what was going on. Let's continue with Booturf.
So in a normal,
so you can see right here the subchamber directly below the Queen's Chamber, which would vibrate as a result of the pulse generator sending vibrations directly up through the bottom of the pyramid towards the Queen's Chamber.
hydraulic ram pump, there's a standpipe, all right, so you got to have a little bit of pressure. What this does is as this fills up, as this reloads, all right, so it creates like a timing effect. Now, there's a granite plug here, but this is also helping with the acoustic resonance of this whole system.
And Hoot Hallow just shared in the chat that the Schumann frequency has been going off the charts lately. I remember seeing something about that recently. Very interesting, Hoot Hallow. Thanks for sharing that.
Now, if you remember, in the Queen's Chamber, we had the hydraulic acid coming down one end. We had the zinc solution coming out of the other end. And in here, we're getting the hydrogen, the H2 gas. That gas then passed through here. And this whole grand gallery, so it would float up through here. This whole grand gallery was a resonator, the dissociation chamber. Now, I'm going to get into detail on this and everything else here in just a minute, but I wanted to show how this pumping pressure, how this whole thing works. This is John Cadman, and also one of the theories by Christopher Dunn, showing how all this works. And I'm going to get into detail on the rest of this system in just a minute. Okay, here we have a close-up cross-section of the Grand Gallery. The Queen's Chamber, like we said, hydrochloric acid came down through here, zinc solution came into here, This is where the hydrogen gas was formed. This little lip right here kept liquid from going into the Queen's Chamber passage. Okay, so it only allowed gases to go through here, which was the H2, the hydrogen molecule gas. It entered the Grand Gallery, or the resonator, and as this thing was working, now there's a bunch of holes in the Grand Gallery. This is a cross-section of the Grand Gallery. You can see it looks like a beautiful concert hall, right? So it's a perfect resonator cavity. All right. There are some contentions that these holes, there's nothing in them when modern times discovered these. But if we look at the next slide here, we can see that it has been proposed, not by me.
Christopher Dunn.
Here's where the gas would come up into the resonator. That they somehow in these slots they had Helmholtz resonators, which is essentially like, have you ever blew your breath over?
They would actually be like reverse Helmholtz resonators. Helmholtz resonators are employed in technology to take vibrations and turn them into sound. To like if you have an engine or something like that, so the engine doesn't shake itself apart. You get rid of those vibrations with a Helmholtz resonator that resonates and takes that vibrational energy and outputs it as sound so that the device won't shake itself apart. These are like reverse Helmholtz resonators, which take sound and turn them into vibrations.
Over top of a bottle of water or something, and you hear a tune or a sound. That's essentially what a Helmholtz resonator does. So using all of the technology that we just discussed as the hydraulic ram pump, creating these shock waves, how these resonators would disassociate the H2 molecule into pure hydrogen atoms here at the top. So this is just one of the theories about the Grand Gallery and its dissociation chamber and resonant chamber. Okay, here's a picture of the Grand Gallery. Down here is where the Queen's Chamber entrance would come into, and it goes upwards, and from here then it would go into the antechamber and then into the King's Chamber. But you can see how they have these cutouts here. Something was in these things in ancient times.
And when this machine was active, if this is true and there were resonator balls in there, this would have been the loudest room on the entire planet. It would have been deafeningly loud. It would loud to the levels that it would liquefy your brain type of loud if you were standing in there when it was active. And the whole chamber would have been filled with hydrogen, so it would have been completely impossible for a human to occupy that.
They had something in here. So one of the contentions is that they were some sort of a resonator, some sort of a facilitator to disassociate the hydrogen molecule into separate hydrogen atoms for use in the maser. Okay, in this picture, this is a 3D rendering that I found. You can see the height of the end of the grand hall at the end of the resonator. You can see this is the opening right here. This is where you'd have to crawl through here. And these are what they call the portcullises, but there's something else. This is what's called what I'm calling the collimator. And I just wanted to show you just for reference purposes what this looked like. I'm going to explain this in a second. Here's another picture I found. It's not really in good quality, but it gives a good depiction of this. This is the upper end of the Grand Gallery, the antechamber, which is what I'm calling the collimator. But you can see you'd crawl through here, then you'd have these four big slabs that were in your way. Then you had to crawl through here again, and then you're in the King's Chamber. And I'm gonna here's a little bit more of some measurements in cubits that I found. You crawl through here, and you've got these four thingies here, and I'm going to explain those in just a bit. You crawl through here, and this
acoustic
is the coffer,
filters,
what they call where the king was supposedly buried. That's funny. And then the King's Chamber. So I'm going to get into this in just a little bit. Now, from the Grand Gallery or the disassociation chamber, we come to the collimator, the antechamber. I'm going to show you that. This is essentially it right here. All right. This is the antechamber, the top of the Grand Galleries here. You crawl through here, then you got this collimator. All right, they call it the antechamber. These are what they call.
And you can see this chamber here, the King's Chamber, and these stacked blocks on top of it with the gaps in between them. That's basically the same thing that they just found 5 of inside of the Khafre pyramid.
Portcullises. Okay, but essentially this is the collimator, which all the collimator does is take scattered electron or the scattered hydrogen atoms.
Epic JJR.
Aligns them so that they're all oriented the right way. Okay, so as the hydrogen would come up here, the pressure would force it through here. Now these would be lowered and raised accordingly, so they would bounce back. Now there's a final one here that's sealed, right, to pressurize this chamber. But as the hydrogen gas, the collimator orients the hydrogen atoms into a coherent mode, just like you would have in a laser. You got to have all the light beams traveling in the right way. The collimator allows for this this orientation to happen. Okay, so essentially, what the portcullis and in the King's antechamber was to essentially align the hydrogen as it entered into the King's chamber. Okay, here we have another section. This is the King's chamber. This is the antechamber, and this is the end of the grand gallery, or the resonator. So we got the dissociation chamber, the collimator, and then as the aligned hydrogen atoms would enter into the King's chamber, this is where I believe they had magnetic material aligned with the axis of direction of where they wanted to focus the hydrogen beam into. Now, if you remember from down below, right, we have the water hammer, the compression of all this. Now, all of these stones were hand cut. They have these little dips in them all over the place. Once they were put into place, they were hand chiseled out so they could tune them. I'm going to show you just a little minute of what a singing stone would sound like. But all these stones were meant to be a large bell, a resonator, singing stones. Okay, so the direction of pulse of compression from up above was ringing these stones. The pressure, oh yeah, these what they call air shafts coming in to the King chamber. All these shafts were dampeners. Okay, once the pressure built up, these doors were closed and this thing was pounded. And compression, what these vents acted as dampeners. Okay, so it didn't have too much pressure, didn't have too little pressure. So when it was hit with the sound wave, it would absorb some of the shock instead of having that large compression wave really smack these stones. It just dampened the effect just a little bit and also kept it into resonance of what it needed to be. This is a really interesting video about the ringing rocks in Montana. The rocks would ring like a bell when they were struck with a hammer or just another rock. Now you got to check this out. This is really interesting.
Ring.
Exactly what the stones in the Great Pyramid were meant to do, was to ring like a bell like that. Okay, so in this picture, we're going to put everything together for you. Down here is where the hydraulic ram was creating shock waves moving up this way. We had the Queen's chamber, hydrogen gas, the resonator hall, which disassociated the H2 molecules into single atomic hydrogen. The collimator, which
is about to get real crazy.
Oriented the hydrogen atoms. Once they were oriented, they were allowed to pass into the King's chamber. Pulses coming up through here, the ringing, bells, the compression.
Crazy Mom Mac. We'll get to that.
From here is where we create the microwave laser. Okay, the microwave laser was then pointed up in this direction. Now, you'll notice that the King's chamber is offset from the center line. Everything is pretty much set on the center line of the pyramid, all the way up through to the top of the capstone. But the reason why the King's chamber is offset just a little bit is what happens is, if you look at this like a cone, all right, or a funnel, if you were to pour water or squirt water straight through the center, it would just come out straight.
I like those harmonics.
Center, right? But if
okay,
you've
Ria,
got
thanks for
this
joining
thing
us.
off center, the King's chamber is off center. The focal point, the lens of the maser was offset. When it hit here, it would create a spiraling. All right, it would just be enough to create a spiraling effect instead of shooting straight out. It would create a helical. It would create a
like water
spiral,
down a drain,
which is exactly what you want coming out of the top of this thing. Now, the capstone hasn't been there. They don't even know if there even was a capstone. I'm going to go into the capstone in just a second and tell you what that was all about and how that focused and what this
high
thing
voltage
did. So,
shunt.
Not only was this thing shooting a microwave laser out of the top of it, well, what was it doing? Why would they even do such a thing? Now, I'm going to get into that in a minute. This is going to be the second part coming up of how this thing generated, captured, and stored electricity. Okay, now that we've got our hydrogen microwave laser up and running, you see in this picture here, somebody had built a Tesla coil and put a copper pyramid on it. You see how it creates this spiraling effect of the electrons. Okay, that's what I believe that they were attempting to do with the Great Pyramid. But the thing is that microwaves, you wouldn't see those. This would be completely invisible. You wouldn't even see anything coming out of the top of the capstone. Now, what was this? What was the purpose of this? Why would they shoot a microwave laser and create all this? Why would they shoot a microwave laser out of the top of the Great Pyramid? Well, that's a good question. One of the main reasons, I believe, and this is where I diverge from the rest of the group as far as the Great Pyramid was used as a power generating device, is that they were shooting the laser into the ionosphere. And everybody knows the ionosphere is where the aurora borealis is, right? Tons of energy, tons of electricity up here, okay? And it starts at only 90 kilometers. That's what, 56 miles up, okay? That's not a very long way. Now, why would the Great Pyramid shoot a microwave laser up into the ionosphere? Well, there's tons of plasma. This is a picture showing how when lightning strikes, it creates an electric field, and you deplete some of the plasma out of the energy density that's in the ionosphere. But why would they do that? Well, it's something that is called a plasma channel. Now, everybody knows that lightning...
Mama Mac, you guys know about plasma channels. You guys might get this.
There's a tremendous amount of electrical energy. From Back to the Future is what, 1.2 gigawatts or some kind of thing? I mean, it's just phenomenal amount. Now, you see this bolt of lightning, all right? The air is not a very good conductor. It's a better insulator, in fact. So what happens to the air when you have a sufficient amount of voltage potential, tons of voltage up here in the Earth's the ground, and eventually it just can't do it anymore. It's called the breakdown. It reaches a breakdown voltage, and then the lightning strike. The energy passes through the air. Now, when that happens, the lightning is actually creating its own plasma channel. You can see how it's incoherent. It's kind of all over the place and jagged and so forth. It's creating its own plasma channel, right? Once that plasma channel is formed, the energy can move almost resistant free. In this picture, you see kind of the same thing. Now, this is how science has induced a plasma channel. You get this really nice coherent beam of energy. Without an induced plasma channel, you get the same thing as lightning. It's just kind of all over the place. Now, what the builders of the Great Pyramid were doing, they were creating, they shot a beam of microwave energy straight up into the air, all right, back up into the ionosphere. And once that plasma channel was created from the ionosphere down to the pyramid, that's when you get this coherent energy back down into the Great Pyramid. We look back at this picture again. Say the Great Pyramid was beaming the microwave laser into the ionosphere here. As soon as it reached, it essentially created a short circuit with all this energy that's in here. It essentially created a short circuit and came back down through the plasma channel. All right, the energy came bursting back down through the atmosphere and back towards the capstone. Now, what it does from there, I'm going to show you in just a second. Okay, once the plasma channel is made, all right, we shoot the microwave laser up into the ionosphere, creates a short circuit between the ionosphere and Earth. The electrons or electricity then rushes back down towards the capstone. What the capstone would need to do would be to act as a high voltage shunt. Okay, essentially a high voltage shunt is if when you have a normal circuit, and if it detects high voltage, it reroutes that voltage. Okay, here's a picture of a high voltage shunt at a power generating station. Okay, all it does is it just protects the circuitry down the line and it reroutes the high voltage. Okay, maybe they had some kind of gap space or something that was connected, to here, so the hydrogen microwave laser would focus up through here, and when the energy came back down, it would then direct it into the limestone. Okay, now I want to talk to you about the limestone because it's a very special type of limestone. It was just recently discovered in the last few years that it was actually man-made limestone. And this is part 3 of
we talked about that earlier, the Geopolymer Institute determining that the limestone casing blocks of the Khafre pyramid were cast in situ.
Of the energy creation, where it came from, and then how they stored it. Okay, now once all this electricity is coming down from the ionosphere, it has to go somewhere. The capstone was a high voltage shunt. It transferred the electricity from going back down into the maser and into the pyramid. It actually sent it into the limestone. Now,
Angus and Sig talking in the chat about HARP and about Tesla technology. Chris Dunn, the author of the Giza power plant, in his new book, believes that the pyramid was an example of Tesla technology. So by creating this hydrogen maser and creating a plasma channel between the pyramid and the ionosphere, it temporarily creates a short circuit, grounding the ionosphere with the electron bridge of the plasma channel and drawing down terawatts of electricity directly from the ionosphere to be stored in the very special limestone casing blocks and repurposed and maybe used to electrify the water. Who knows what's going on.
A man named Joseph David Ovitz did an X-ray analysis of the pyramids, the casting stones, and the limestone quarries that were close by, supposedly where the casting stones, the outer stones came from. And after doing an analysis, he found that the two substances were considerably different. All right, they weren't the same. First of all, the limestone quarries, the limestone that was X-rayed there, did not have air bubbles, didn't have bubbles in it at all. The limestone that was X-rayed that came off of the Great Pyramid found to have considerable small bubbles in them. Also, he also found that it had high amount of special minerals such as opal, hydroxyapatite, and silicoaluminate, right, which are not found in the quarries. Now, David Ovitz went on to explain further the very importance of the hydroxyapatite in a paper that he did here. It's called The Fusion Path and Conduction Mechanisms of Protons and Hydroxyapatite. Now, what he says here is that essentially it's a principal organic component of bone and teeth, but also it's a very important bioceramic. All right, it's a bioceramic, and an electrical engineer will tell you that a ceramic is an excellent dielectric. It's what they use to make capacitors out of. Okay, and what he's saying is it actually has a hydrogen plus or a hydrogen plus conductor with potential for energy conversion devices. Now, it is my contention that the limestone that was man-made was built specifically to cover the Great Pyramid, to act as a capacitor. All of that energy that came down flowed into microscopic charging. I mean, this thing would have stored an enormous amount of electrical potential in the limestone surrounding the Great Pyramid itself,
that they could then tap whenever they wanted for whatever purposes they needed it for.
Okay, so let's just recap. We know we had water coming down, creating a hydraulic ram pump, which created shock waves up through the system that operated all this. Okay, we know that the Queen's Chamber, hydrogen gas formed, the gas moved sideways into the Great Hall, the resonator. You can call it the dissociation chamber. So H2 came in here, pure hydrogen atoms ended up at the top, went through the collimator. The collimator arranged the hydrogen atoms so that it would come into the King's Chamber in a coherent way. The coffer was where magnetic material was put in a line with the axis. That's why the coffer is directly over the top of the apex of the King's Chamber. These resonating stones with the pulsing of the water hammer effect created compression, which then actually what made the maser, or essentially the microwave laser, function using hydrogen. This then came up, it came up in an offset, caused the electrons to swirl and up out of the top of the capstone. Now, when the energy hit from the top of the capstone and went into the ionosphere, when the energy reached the ionosphere, what it did was it created a plasma channel, okay, which made it essentially almost resistant free for electrons to flow back down. What they were doing was essentially creating a short circuit from the ionosphere to Earth. Once that energy came back down the plasma channel, hit the capstone acted like a high voltage shunt, and instead of going back into the pyramid, it actually was channeled into the limestone, which we know what was man-made limestone. It had bubbles in it. It had microscopic bubbles, and according to research by other people, this would have been a fantastic capacitor material. This would have made a huge capacitor. So the inner part created a microwave laser, which then shorted out the electrons from the ionosphere, brought that down, and it was stored into the layer, the limestone layer coating in the outside of the pyramid as a battery. From there, they used it for whatever. I guess there's some rumor that the lighthouse at Alexandria, it was lit 24 hours a day, nonstop. Maybe this is how they were lighting it. There were some connections in some other buildings around. I think it was the Hather, where they show light bulbs. Okay, let me show you guys that. Okay, these were found at the temple at Dendera, where these light bulbs. These are the reliefs in the drawing, and you can see it clearly looks like a light bulb with some filament in here. There's a cord coming out of the end of it, going into something, and this looks like you have some sort of a standoff. These could be a resonator, or it could be some sort of an insulator. Okay, so there's several depictions of these things in this temple at Dendera of what a light bulb could be used for, or how this electricity was being used to generate light. Because if you remember, in the Great Pyramid, there wasn't any signs of soot. There's no blackening or any signs of soot or anything that people used torches in there. Okay, as a matter of fact, I heard somebody mention in a video somewhere they couldn't even light their lighter. There was not enough oxygen down there to even light a simple lighter. You had to have an electric flashlight. So anyway, this is kind of the gist of the theory, or rather.
Here's another video about the hydraulic ram pump. I think this one shows a demonstration.
And its subterranean chamber to see if it would really work as a water pump. In July of '99, he built his first model using a nearby river as a reservoir. Unfortunately, the model did not work, first leaking, then cracking, and failing to pump water as he had hoped.
He had to reinforce it with cement because the vibrations were so strong that it was exploding the containers that he was building.
But Cadman would not give up that easily. He built another model, then another, both of which suffered the same fate as the first. But on his fourth try, he got everything right, and much to Cadman's delight, his pump worked. This proved to Cadman, beyond a doubt, that the Great Pyramid could have functioned as a giant water pump, and that surely this was not by accident. It was clear, he asserted, that the creators of the Great Pyramid's subterranean chamber had known exactly what they were doing. This was the breakthrough that disciples of Edward Kunkel's original work in the 1960s had been waiting for. The tangible proof that a Great Pyramid water pump was more than just speculation. And yet, as Cadman continued his research, the results got even more mind-blowing and, in fact, went far beyond the mere pumping of water. Having proved that the Great Pyramid's subterranean chamber could function as a water pump, Cadman built a new, bigger model and encased it in concrete in order to simulate the effects of the pump operating underground. He moved the model, which weighed over 500 pounds, to a seasonal creek with a pond serving as a reservoir. As this model began to work, Cadman immediately noticed something which shocked him. Encased in concrete, the pump was creating a vertical compression wave, a recurring heartbeat-like thump, which could be felt through the ground 20 feet away and heard more than 100 feet away. Cadman realized that what he had constructed went far beyond just a water pump. Because of the powerful waves it generated, Cadman renamed this device a pulse generator. Truly, this changed everything. If the Great Pyramid's subterranean chamber was generating pulse waves, these waves would have moved through the granite upper chambers and passageways of the pyramid and, due to granite's reflective properties, created ionization in the atmosphere, in effect producing an electric field. Put more simply, The pulses created by the subterranean pump would have interacted with the pyramid's granite to produce electricity.
And there's this interview with Chris Dunn on Danny Jones, where he plays this segment from researcher Friedman Freund, who describes the phenomenon of earthquake lights, where in areas with mountains where there's granite underneath in the bedrock, when there's tectonic activity, the granite is pressurized and depressurized from the tectonic movement, which it releases electrons, which gather at the peaks of mountains, and then when the charge is sufficient, it discharges and causes bright flashes of lights in the sky above the mountains. It's called earthquake lights. It seems like the pyramid, with Jamie Butorf's theory added into it, was designed to mimic this natural function of the earthquake lights and specifically generate electrons to create that temporary electron bridge between the pyramid and the ionosphere to draw down all of that electricity from the ionosphere. So here's Chris Dunn pointing out Friedman Freund's research on Danny Jones' podcast.
And the most significant discovery was made by Friedman Freund, Dr.
Texas
Friedman
Trump girl.
Who is he?
Friedman Freund, he's a physicist, works at NASA, and he was studying earthquake lights.
Yeah, it seems to me that each of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau have a different function. They have different interior chambers. They have different subterranean features, as we saw from the new discoveries, which have been released with the 648-meter-long 8 vertical shafts culminating in 2 giant 80-meter by 80-meter by 80-meter cubes, hollow. Each of these 3 pyramids probably functioned in conjunction with each other to accomplish a variety of tasks. It's fascinating.
And his objective was to determine if, by monitoring the Earth at these seismic hotspots, if earthquake lights could actually be a early warning system for impending earthquakes. And so he was studying the earthquake lights, different areas around the world.
Okay.
And there was one particular place that it became apparent that there was an earthquake coming, and that was in Italy.
No paradoxes here, Wiley.
It was called the Aquila earthquake. But his discovery,
all pretty straightforward,
is really I think the most important discovery in this century, or the last century, is because you have a source of electrons that's directly under our feet. And so what I tried to do in a GIZA, the Tesla solution, was to highlight the idea that, we have been making advances in semiconductor physics, transistors and things of that nature. And
seems to me, Hoot Hollow, maybe the middle pyramid with the giant wells and the cavities at the bottom was the pump pyramid, and then the Great Pyramid was the pyramid that generated the electricity. It needs to be explored, though, for sure.
We make a quantum leaps in understanding and function of devices that control the way electrons behave within a particular device, like a cell phone or a laptop, something like that.
Right.
All of those are amazing advances, right? All those electrons are coming through wires and generated, for the most part, from traditional power plants that are operating principally the same way they have for over 100 years.
Right.
Right? And so they basically boil water, create steam, push turbine blades, rotate generators, and harvest the electrons, and then put it in.
For the record, Chris Dunn is a master machinist and aerospace executive.
Transmit it into the grid.
Okay.
Here, It's to recognize that all those electrons that you want are actually under your feet.
And if we could harness the electrons that are released by the granite from normal tectonic activity, that's like tons and tons and tons of power that we could capture somehow if we could figure it out. And I think that's what the Great Pyramid was for, replicating that natural system in a way that can be harnessed using those electrons to tap the ionosphere for even more electricity, which is just constantly replenished by the sun. So you're having virtually no effect on the ionosphere with just a quick little plasma arc to draw down a whole bunch of terawatts of power. And then the sun just immediately replenishes the ionosphere. Effectively infinite power, not quite infinite, but really, really a lot of power.
And there are some areas of the world, in the country, that are more active in terms of earthquake lights than others, and certain areas that are more seismically unstable than others. And so, the question is, should a serious study be funded or followed to investigate whether we can actually access those electrons directly and use them rather than going through the process of extraction of fossil fuels, burning, all the ancillary costs that you have, transportation and stuff like that, pollution. But here you have a battery under your feet. Why could we tap into it and draw that energy out? So what does Dr. Freund do about his theory? He studied the effects. He studied in his laboratory how to generate electron flow in different types of rocks, igneous rocks, like granite.
What is the meaning of igneous rocks? What does that mean?
It means it was formed as magma in the earth, as opposed to sedimentary rocks.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So the igneous rocks are basically, they contain these peroxide defaults in the minerals, and when they are stressed or pressure is put on them, they will migrate to the surface very rapidly. And he's demonstrated in his lab that he can take a granite block or beam of granite, he put it in a hydraulic press, equipped it with electrodes and a monitor, oscilloscope.
Later, T.
Put pressure on one end, squeezed it, and electrons flowed from one pole to the other, one end to the other.
Wow.
And he was able to measure it.
That's an explanation for the earthquake lights. This is happening.
So you could literally create power just by putting granite in a vise, and electrons flow out of it under the pressure from the piezoelectric characteristic of quartz.
Under deep inside the earth, near vault, near these seismic areas where there's fault lines and stuff like that. And when these giant rocks are being crammed together, these electrons are being released and they shoot out through the rock, up through the surface of the earth and into the sky.
Yeah. You want to show a YouTube video?
Yes. Which video should we show?
It's
talking
up in his 80s now. He's a wonderful guy.
Came to Christchurch to talk about earthquakes, and there's no better place in the world, I would say, than to talk about earthquakes. In particular, I want to give you hope. So, if we look at the photo of the New Zealand islands, it looks so peaceful and placid. You see Christchurch at the left side. But on certain days, occasionally...
Come on, Danny Jones, producer, switch it. Make Chris Dunn the small picture and make the video we're watching the big picture. Come on, producer, do better.
The earth speaks to us with a very violent voice, and many of you have gone through this experience. I would like to present you with the question, what if we would be able to see these earthquakes coming days before they arrive? Now, I worked for the past 30 years at NASA in California. Before this, I was professor in Germany. And during that time, I was doing things that had no relationship.
Guy wasn't Operation Paperclip, was he?
Earthquakes. I was studying single crystals. I started out working on very, very simple single crystals, totally, as I said, unrelated, never dreaming that what I would be working on could one day have influence and importance for understanding earthquakes. Magnesium oxide, the simplest oxide material that exists. And I worked on it for a number of years. And I discovered something that everybody else had overlooked, had missed. And that is a defect, a type of defect in these crystals. And I should say a defect in our world of solid-state physics is something that occurs, it's not a crack, it is something on the atomic, on the subatomic level. What I discovered was that in the crystal structure, like here on the lower left side, there are these defects that are totally invisible. We have no way how to directly observe these peroxy defects. But when we do nasty things to the crystal, they fall apart and produce electric charge carriers. Then I found the same kind of defects in other materials, including natural minerals, either from the crust or from the Earth's mantle. Almost every mineral seems to have these. And if minerals have them, then of course rocks would have them. So now I want to show you what you can do when you play around with rocks. So here you see a 4-meter-long piece of granite in my laboratory at NASA Ames. And all what I'm doing here is I put some contacts to the rock at the far end and a contact up here, and I squeeze here. In the moment I start squeezing here, a current starts to flow through the unstressed rock. And if I put an ammeter, a picoamp in the circuit, I can measure an electric current. And here you see this example measured from this particular 4-meter-long piece of granite. In the moment, the green curve is the load. The moment I start to load the rock, a current begins to flow.
Insane. So you could just drill down tiny little holes, attach electrodes to the granite bedrock all over the planet and just constantly be receiving electric charge from the natural tectonic activity that's going on.
And rises very, very rapidly at low stress levels, saturates, stays constant. Actually, we have measured this over a month. The current continues to flow if we keep it loaded. This is a behavior that is reminiscent of semiconductor, the things from which you build transistors and hence available in all electronics.
And the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid, which is made of granite, is constantly being subjected to the pressure from all the stones above, which are constantly squeezing the granite, creating this type of effect for thousands of years. And that's just one little tiny element of the many ways that the pyramid generates power.
Here at the bottom, you see a schematic on the right-hand side. The stress activates electrons and holes. Holes is a name for the defect electrons. These are electronic particles that are generated and that are actually necessary to be able to produce a transistor. And we found out that the electrons have to stay in the stress rock volume while the holes can flow out. They flow out at about 100 meters per second, which is about the speed of a jet landing in an airport. They are very fast. They propagate through it. And in this particular experiment, the electrons have to come around through the wire and shake hands at the front end of this rock. Now, this is a combination of a semiconductor behavior, the formation of electrons and holes, and of an electrochemical battery. That means we can separate the positive holes flowing through the rock from the negative holes that flow through the wire. This is exciting, and this is new. So now let's do a Gedanken experiment. Take this rock and imagine that it would be sitting vertically in the Earth's crust, and that this rock is not 4 meters long, but 1 kilometer, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers long, 30, 50, 100 kilometers long, if we are in a subduction zone like you have it here on the North Island. If that end of that volume of rock is being stressed by the enormous tectonic forces in the Earth, electricity is generated, and under certain conditions, this electricity flows out of the stressed rock volume and into the surrounding rock. And we have means to see these things flowing over a distance of tens of kilometers under natural conditions. These are amazing processes that had never before been properly understood. So all these things we can now use to learn something about the stress state of rocks deep below our feet, far beyond the direct reach. We have to deduce their presence from these indirect measurements. We can establish these causality ranges linked together by chemistry and by physics. So I wanted to briefly mention this infrared emission. The infrared emission is when the charge carriers come to the surface, they can recombine. During this recombination, these charge carriers release energy, and these two oxygens that you show there up, they become suddenly about 20,000 degrees hot vibrationally, and they emit bursts of infrared radiation. But one characteristic feature that these charge carriers try to accumulate mostly on mountaintops, on hillsides, not in the valley. So now I want to show you here a result from a PhD thesis of Luca Pirotti in Italy, who had analyzed, I think, 18 months of Italy. Every night he looked for these anomalies. And prior to this earthquake in L'Aquila in 2009, he identified this anomaly that you see here in red, with a loss of life of more than 300 people. And
So basically, the granite gets squeezed in the tectonic activity. The electrons flow up and gather at the peaks of mountains or hills. And when the charge gets big enough, they discharge into the atmosphere. It seems like the Great Pyramid was designed to mimic that effect, but supercharge it so they could create a plasma channel up to the ionosphere, harvesting electricity from the ionosphere, storing it in the capacitor-style limestone casing blocks, and then using it for who knows what. You know, you build a car, you leave it outside in the woods for a few decades. All that metal erodes away and disappears to nothing. Any type of metallic machines or creations that were possessed by these ancient civilizations would have long turned to dust. So we have no idea what they were actually doing, what kind of stuff they had. But I thought that this would be a good topic to talk about, considering the big discovery that's just come out about Giza and these crazy structures beneath the Khafre pyramid. Tantalizing secrets of a lost super race that blanketed the entire surface of the Earth, capable of generating power on a massive scale, clearly with immense engineering and technological capacity to even be able to carve out these shafts that are 648 meters long and these giant cubic cavities beneath. There's something going on in ancient history that's way more advanced than mainstream academia is willing to admit. So why are they keeping this all secret? Why have they lied to us about all of these things? That's what I want to know. That is what I want to know. Let's see. We're already at like 3 hours, 21 minutes. I guess we're going to have to get into the JFK files tomorrow. But Mama Mac sent an interesting thing. Breaking: President of the Congo just offered ownership of some of his country's $24 trillion in minerals in a plea for President Trump to bring peace to the region. Quote, "We think of the United States of America, given its role and influence around the world, is an important partner to have, and we are very happy to see that with the Trump administration, things are moving a lot faster on both sides. Most people don't know why the whole conflict in Congo started, but long story short, Felix Tshisekedi is a weak puppet who has allowed his country to be looted by Europe and now China. At the same time, he's permitted the FDLR, a group with close ties to the Rwandan genocide, which the U.S. has identified as responsible for many killings in eastern Congo, to operate, which Rwanda is rightfully concerned about. Tshisekedi is a corrupt pawn that the globalists have used to do their bidding, but if someone could put this guy in his place, it would be Trump. So it'd be interesting if we end up owning a piece of the Congo and having access to tons of minerals and stuff that they have over there.
Can you talk about the discussions for a deal with your country?
Très bien, merci. Thank you very much. Good evening to you. We are looking for partnerships, and we have established partnerships with many other countries, and we think the United States of America, given its role and influence around the world, is an important partner to have. And we are very happy to see that with the Trump administration, things are moving a lot faster on both sides.
Untapped deposits are worth an estimated $24 trillion. What would you need to happen to move forward with that relationship.
We want to extract these minerals, but also process them, as this would create a lot of jobs. And we want a partnership that will provide lasting peace and stability for our countries, which we need.
It's a dangerous place, the Congo. How would a U.S. company guarantee safety on the ground?
We can build our defense and security capabilities. And I think that the U.S. is able to use either pressure or sanctions to make sure that armed groups who are in the DRC can be kept at bay.
Very interesting development, Mama Mac. Thanks for sharing that. Let's check out this video Hoot Hallow sent. Theory of the Eiffel Tower is certainly a wild one. Let me guess. I got a feeling that giant steeple pointing up into the air is alleged to be capturing electromagnetism from the atmosphere.
This has been concealed for centuries. The real purpose of the Eiffel Tower is something far beyond what you've been told. Most people believe it's nothing more than a symbol of Parisian culture or a product of the industrial era. The truth? The Eiffel Tower was designed as a massive antenna, an instrument for wireless electricity experiments, and its secrets could have revolutionized the world. The year was 1889, and the tower was unveiled at the Paris World's Fair, touted as a temporary exhibit. But here's where it gets strange. The true intent behind this engineering marvel was hidden in plain sight. Nikola Tesla visited Paris in the 1880s. During his stay, he met with Gustave Eiffel and shared his groundbreaking vision for a world powered by free wireless energy. Tesla had already proven with his Wardenclyffe Tower that electricity could be transmitted wirelessly across vast distances. Eiffel, utterly fascinated by Kessler's revolutionary ideas, took these principles and incorporated them into the design of the Eiffel Tower. This was not just about aesthetics, this was about power, real power. During the tower's construction, strange phenomena were reported. Electromagnetic anomalies, unexplained lights, and strange sparks were seen surrounding the tower. Locals spoke of nighttime experiments, and some even claimed to have witnessed orbs of light dancing around the structure. Why hasn't this been exposed?
Very interesting, Hoot. Seems like a lot of the classical architecture as well, with the domes that have the big pointed, metal spikes on the top, may have been doing the same thing. Harvesting electromagnetism from the low atmosphere, delivering it down to ground level. Crazy stuff. Let's do a couple more things before we wrap it up. Boston Dynamics, Atlas, the future of humanoid robotics. Boston Dynamics has unveiled significant enhancements to the movement capabilities of its humanoid robot, Atlas, through a collaboration with the Robotics and AI Institute. Utilizing reinforcement learning and a motion capture suit, Atlas now exhibits highly fluid and human-like movements, including complex actions like cartwheels and breakdance moves. This development showcases a leap in robotics aiming to bridge the uncanny valley, which is when something is pretty human but not quite, resulting in a feeling of revulsion from the observer. So bridging the uncanny valley by improving mobile manipulation, agility, and adaptability in real-world scenarios. The demonstrations have sparked widespread interest and discussions about the future of robotics, with many expressing awe at Atlas's advanced capabilities and speculating on the future applications in various fields. Let's check out a video of the new version of Atlas. Very human motion. Super human. That's very impressive. Look at that. Uncanny Valley basically gone. Wow. Oh, man. Terrifying. Imagine that thing chewing its way through your wall at 3 a.m, sparking at the mouth as it comes to eat you. Super Soldiers, Angus. Yeah, it sounds about right. Boston Dynamics. Terrifying company. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up here after that. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you enjoyed the show. I know we went on a long tangent about the Egypt stuff, but I figured that in context with the new discovery, it it was important to go over some of the other clues that there was some type of ancient advanced civilization way back in the day that would have been able to construct these massive 648-meter shafts and these huge 80 by 80 by 80 meter cubes beneath the Khafre pyramid. It'll be interesting if we ever get to explore it. Egypt is probably going to say, no, we're not going to allow any excavation. That's what I'd bet on. But in addition to those, all of those other cavities and chambers may have been the refuge for the humans to survive the flood back in the day. Who knows, man? Who knows? Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to throw Mama Max some love over at alplama.com. Avoid avoid the petrochemical pharmaceutical industry that wants you sick and dependent, and try some natural tinctures to remedy your ailments. They taste bad. They're so good for you, right, Mama? Right, Mama Mac? I got something in my throat. Alplama. Yuck. If you want to support the show directly, you can hit up our link tree at Common Censored. Find links to our merch, Golden Cocoon, EMF, Modern Day Tinfoil hats, our books. You can donate to the show. You can rumble rant, share the show. That'll earn you your first rank in the Common Censored Info Infantry branch of your choice. Join or die, as you know. You can join the Info Army, Info Navy, Info Marines, Info Space Force, Info Air Force, etc. Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. Who can we raid today? I was supposed to raid somebody today. Is there somebody that we can raid? Let me know in the chat who's out there and who is broadcasting right now that we can raid. I'll start looking over here too and see if I can find anybody. Darth Jason, that sounds like a good idea. All right, let's check in on Darth Jason, see what's going on at Dark Side Radio. You guys getting any sound off that? Or, oh, there we go.
Desert land, he ain't gonna come home again. He's making some money for a Texas man.
All right, guys, go hang out with Darth Jason. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We'll be back tomorrow. I forgot to mention, as I typically do, that it is indeed Hump Day.
Hump Day!
So thanks for being here for Hump Day. We'll be back tomorrow, guys. Until then, have a kick-ass day. This has been episode 354. Massive Giza Pyramid Revelations. JFK Files we'll get to tomorrow. Excuse me, the fake Miami drone show. Owen Schroyer swatted. All kinds of crazy stuff. We will be back in the near future. Let me launch this raid real quick. Boom. All right, raid confirmed, guys. Have a fun time hanging out with Darth Jason. Join us Monday through Friday, 6:45 p.m.-ish Eastern Time as we cover all the crazy clown world, the clusterfuck, chaos. Use hashtag Common Censored and hashtag Info Infantry where applicable when you share the show. You can find us on X at @LordSterling_. We're also on Truth Getter, Gab, and Minds. Links to everything will be posted in the video description momentarily. All right, guys, till tomorrow, you know what to do. Think for yourself. Question authority. Think for yourself. Question authority. Think for yourself. Question authority. Think for yourself. And smash that like button, guys. Catch you on the flip side. Till then, take it sleaze.